That's great. Okay.
You're alive.
I'd like to call to order the Thursday, April 1st, 2021, 7 p.m. Planning Commission virtual public meeting. My name is Benjamin Sale. I am the chair of the Planning Commission. Everyone, please check your mute if you're on, and please use your space bar when you're talking or some other method so you can keep the background noise to a minimum. Ms. Tammy Hook, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Sale,
Here.
Mr. Wallman,
Present.
Mr. Ply,
Present.
Ms. Butler,
Present.
Mr. Imes.
Here.
All right, looks like we have everyone present, and we are still awaiting extra positions to be filled. I believe they are working their way through the chain, and we'll see those other members soon enough. Looking at the agenda, which should be shared on your screen right now, we've gone through A and B, and we'll go down to C eventually, but we do need to approve the agenda. So we'll take a look and go down. We'll have the minutes, followed by the major site design reviews of 39 Hudson and 100 Ridgely, which we approved in our last meeting and have findings and opinions to approve today. Also, the 0520 moderately priced dwelling units, MPDUs, that will be a continuation. I'm sorry, finding an opinion on that as well. And then the new business and comp plan update. I'd like to not go over comp plan update today and save that time to go into the public hearings, unless it's something that could be done in 3-5 minutes or less by the planning staff. Now, Sally,
I think Eric could do that in 3 minutes. He
That's
could
good.
just.
All right, we'll continue with that then. Thank you. We'll keep it. Then we have public hearings for the medical cannabis dispensaries, which are continued from the last meeting. And also we have bulk regulations, which is a new one for tonight. And that is the agenda as written, and we will continue with it and on the whole, unless anyone has a recommended modification from the commissioners. All right, I move that we approve the agenda as written.
I'll second.
We have a motion, a second. Any more discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll move along with the agenda. Going down to the approval of minutes for the March 18 minutes. I believe we had some, I'll stop the share there. I believe we had some modifications by Diane Butler that came through the chain. Is that correct, Diane?
Yep.
All right. And to make sure we display those properly for everyone, give me a potato here. And Diane, you can go ahead and talk about those recommended changes if you have anything to say right now while I'm bringing them up.
Gosh, are we looking at the 18th or the 4th?
18th.
There were a couple little things like the word curb instead of curve with a V. Mostly they're typos more than anything, if I recall. I can double check. I have to open it up myself.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share what I have here.
I don't think there was anything.
You recognize
substantive.
this?
Yep. Oh, you know what? I found out that Betsy McEwen is DPW. I just saw the name and I wasn't familiar with it. And I just thought it was helpful to put in Director of Public Works for Michael Johnson, because a couple of places we've referred to the department, and when he's speaking, it's really Department of Public Works, not Planning and Zoning. So that was just a clarification.
Okay.
And I think the rest of those are pretty minor as well. Just clarifies a few things.
And the additional charging stations in the future, that was a good catch there. Thank you. Down for 100 Ridgely. BDUs continued. And then we go down to medical cannabis, and we had exhibits for the staff memorandum, the 1.5 mile buffer. And also we had public testimony from the older persons. Alderman Arnett did not comment at the meeting, last meeting, but he did make comments. I believe. So there we go.
So Ben, do you want to take him out of the testimony box then? You want to remove him? Because you're right.
Mr. Arnett, do you have an opinion on that? Is there anything you see any reason why we should remove you? Because you weren't at the last meeting, as I recall, correct?
That's correct, and you're not alone on wanting to remove me from a number of things.
I love comedic relief because we do need that. All right, we'll remove Mr. Arnett. All right. Any other changes from anyone on the commission? I'll make a motion to move for approval of the minutes as amended, plus removing that Mr. Arnett from that line down there.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any oppositions? Any abstentions? None. Motion passes unanimously. All right, moving right along, which is always perfect. Got the minutes out of the way for March 18th. We shouldn't have any. Do we have any other minutes, Tammy, to take care of? Because
Yes, the March 4th ones
The 4th
from
one,
last
right?
month we didn't approve.
get that one up. So go back in time.
Yeah, I think we were ready to approve the March 4th ones, but didn't have a quorum at the time we hit that part of the agenda.
Yeah, because do you need to look at them again? Does anyone need to
No,
look at those?
That's where I was going. I think we were
All right. So does anybody feel the need that we have to open these up? That'll save me a minute or two because I can bring them up. But if you don't want to, that's fine.
Diane had some changes in there that I'm not sure if everybody read it or not.
All right, I'm opening it up.
I didn't change anything from the last time we reviewed it, though.
Okay, here comes the share. There it is. And item number 2 there, Alex, that's always something I think we get when we have some fresh time in a future meeting, maybe we can bring that up again for administrative talk. So I'll make a note of that because that's a good one to talk about again. I think you brought up a good feeling that we probably need to dive into. So whenever we get a spare moment in the next couple of weeks, good for process.
Hello.
You might want to mute yourself, Bob. Okay, does anyone want to see anything else with regard to those changes?
Move to approve the March 4th minutes as amended.
We have a motion for approval. I'll second that motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposition? Any abstentions? Perfect. Motion passes unanimously. Those minutes are also approved. Next, we move on to item D in our agenda. Go to approval and findings and opinions. We'll start off with our with the City of Annapolis property at 39 Hudson Street for our Public Works Department. And after that, going to 100 Ridgely Avenue.
So I move that we adopt the findings passed around by Mr. Beard.
We have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? And when you say those findings,
Well, I meant for
there's two.
for number
So
one, but
you want to go for both?
I would
We can go for
I
both.
would advocate we would do them both together. Unless
Yeah,
anybody.
actually, Mr. Sale, if what I suggest is we go straight to the conditions. If that's possible, because everything else was in the staff report and really doesn't change. It's the conditions which count and the wording of the conditions.
Because you want me to open them up and you want to look at the conditions.
If you've got them close, and just go right to the conditions because they're pretty lengthy.
I'll double check that. All right, we'll start off with 39 Hudson. Okay, can you see that?
Yes. All right, those are the normal ones.
All right, well, let's go through starting at one so we can just fly through them because they're all of them in the same category.
Okay.
Decision and resolution. Try to make this look a little prettier so I can actually read it.
I mean, I think it's really number 14 that's the
Right. Everything else is
sort of boilerplate.
ordinary.
Final
I
site,
agree.
applicant, landscaping, applicant alter 10, exterior signage for such a conform. 12, the applicant shall obtain applicable grading, all references applicant develop. The facility, number 14, the facility shall consume electrical energy from the city's allocation of solar, all right, produced by the Waterworks Park Solar Farm to the extent possible and from Baltimore Regional Cooperative Purchasing Committee. There you go. Any issue with item 14 from anyone?
I move to approve.
Second it.
There's a motion second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion passes. 39 Hudson Street. Opinion is approved.
Do I have approval from all the commissioners to sign your names to it?
Yes,
All the commissioners, we'll start with the roll call from who's been here the longest, starting with Bob. Does he have your permission? Well, it's actually the signature is from the chairman and the vice chair and everybody else. So yes. So we'll start from the top. The chair, Ben Sale. Yes, you have my permission. Vice chair, Mr. Waldman,
Yes, you have my permission.
Mr. Pline,
yes,
Ms. Butler,
Yes,
Mr. Iams.
Yes.
Be it so known that Mr. Beard, you have the ability to sign for all of us for this 39 Hudson Street opinion as it is written.
Very well, thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to 100 Ridgely.
I'll make a motion to approve as written.
Okay,
I'll second that.
there's a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? No opposition, no abstentions. So the minutes as written for the 100 Ridgely as were passed around, and I'm also showing those again here, are approved. We'll go down to the conditions. Just to be sure for everybody. And of course, that was the nice when we added number 12, the infrastructure with the capacity for at least 4 electric car charging stations shall be installed. I just wanted to show that item for the public as another movement by us to push the movement to electric car charging stations being widely available in the city of Annapolis. Thank you, commissioners, for that recommendation. Stop the share. The item. Selling the good work you guys are doing out there. So
I also have permission to sign.
Yes.
yes,
Yes,
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to sign off. Thank you very much.
thank you
Thanks,
very
Fred.
much.
Take care.
All right, we've gotten through there we go, back to the agenda. We've gotten through the findings for 39 and 100, down for 5020 MPDUs. Anything to add on that from the staff while we're opening that up?
Nope. You could also include your permission to sign in those, if you don't mind.
Okay.
I don't think there was anything additional on that other than what was
Right.
written. at the time.
I didn't have anything either, so we can expedite. I'll make a motion that we approve minutes as written for 5020, or the opinion.
Second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
aye,
Any
Aye.
opposition? No oppositions, and I give permission for signature. Mr. Waldman,
Yes.
Mr. Pline,
yes,
Mr. Iams, Ms.
Yes.
Butler.
yes.
Thank you, everyone. Mr. Beard, you have everything you need with regards to all 3 of those now? You might have bolted into mute there. Okay. All right, let's back to the agenda.
I do for the 2 that I drafted.
Yep. And then for Sally, staff, anything? No issues.
Right, that's just a recommendation to council, so I took care of that one.
Okay. All right, we're gonna bypass new business because I don't have any, unless anyone else has any. Perfect. Moving on to comprehensive plan update from staff.
Yeah, the only thing I want to share in just a minute is that we had a work session with City Council today where we updated them on draft goals that we've put together for the various elements of the comprehensive plan. We're going to post that to the comprehensive plan website this evening. I can send it to the planning commission as well. I think it would be good for you to review. The idea is that the goals guide the recommendations. And so although we've started to draft the recommendations as well, we want to refine the goals and make sure they're spot on. And so we're going to be continuing to do engagement with community members and make sure that we hear as much as we can. But yeah, we're moving forward, and the goals took a big step today, I think, in just what we were able to share. So that's the update.
Please, yeah, I think it would be a good idea to distribute that.
Yeah. Happy to do that. And I should say the last thing, we're working towards a more substantial document that we can share in late May that would kind of be more goals, metrics, recommended actions for the various comprehensive plan elements, something that the public can respond to as well as you and to the council, and then take it from there, get as much feedback as we can. So there's still plenty of time for people to participate in this process. And
You want more?
I'm
Do we hear
sorry.
anybody say anything, or was that just background noise? I think it was background noise. Okay, so
That's
we're
it.
hearing a lot more time for people to still communicate their wishes.
Yep.
And we have given a lot of time to the public to make input over the last 3 years, actually. So we'll continue that because COVID's been effective for affecting people over last year. And hopefully, if people want to come out, we'll work for it and see our latest draft. They'll make some more comments. So we've had some great efforts by the Forest Drive Esports Sector Study Area group that was meeting on the side. And we'll take that into consideration. We have a copy of that for most of the commissioners should have been able to see that. If not, we can forward it around. It's also going to be posted on the Planning Commission websites. And yes, definitely something we want to take a look at. So we'll move into that later in some other meeting. Anything else from staff? Wonderful. So
Thank you.
31 minutes and we've moved on to public hearings, which is really good. For the two public hearings we have, the 0421 medical cannabis dispensaries continued from March 18th, and the bulk regulations being a new one. We will go over the cannabis dispensaries first. I think that's a smart way to do that, and then go into bulk regulations second, as it is written and approved by the rest of the commissioners. Now, for the medical cannabis dispensaries, we had the sponsors of the legislation available to talk if they wanted to at the last meeting, and we had Dewan Gay speak. We did not have Mr. Arnett, who's a sponsor of the legislation, and we did not have the mayor, who was a sponsor of that legislation as well. But we do have them tonight. And I think it's fair to give sponsors of the legislation a chance to give their spiel that didn't have a chance to talk the last time. So I'd like, if any of the commissioners disagree, they'll let me know, but I'd like to be able to start off when we do this in another couple of minutes with Mr. Arnett or the mayor giving their spiel in support of the legislation that they have proposed with Mr. Gay. And also after that, we can go into any other council members that are present that want to give testimony, because they represent large portions of the city. They can give us their feedback from what they've gotten over the last 2 weeks, because the council members that were present at the last meeting did have some taskers to get more information and come back this time, both Mr. Gay and Ms. Findell Charles, if they wanted to. So we will give all the council members their time tonight to talk in that order. And then after that, we will go through any public comments that we've received and go over those. However, before all of that, we will have the staff present anything that they want to present to us as commissioners that we have asked for. Now, staff, I'll give you a chance here. If you'd like to go before the council members or after is your choice, but I think it'd be logical we do in our standard order. Any new information from staff, then public commenters. It's kind of weird. If we only had one meeting a month, we would do it all in a row. But since we have these duplicative meetings, we still have to kind of go back and hit things that might seem slightly out of order since we've already gone into public hearing from the last meeting. Does this sound logical, commissioners?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Dr. Nash, okay. And on that note, I don't feel a need for myself to take a quick break to organize. I think I have enough to, let's go ahead and get rolling. And if I feel a need to take have us take a recess so I can get more organized on files for display, I'll let you know. But I think we can go ahead and move on. Any reason not to from the commissioners or staff? Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead, Ms. Nash and staff. Anything you have? I'm going to stop the share here. And if you'd like, I can bring up your files or you can bring them up. Sally?
I will bring up the map. So after our last meeting, or at our last meeting, you asked for some additional research, which we have sent you, that Jackie Rouse did. And it is also posted in eTrackit under the project ZTA 2001 -003. All of that information can be found there. You asked for an additional map showing a 1 mile buffer around all schools and churches. This is actually just schools because the one with schools and churches was very hard to read. And even this, as you can see, is pretty hard to read. And this includes all private, public, and daycares as schools. So you can see we have quite a bit, and it would basically, that radius would mean there could be no dispensaries in the city limits.
If we were to adopt a 1 mile radius from any educational facility of those types, right?
That's right. You also asked, Commissioner Butler reminded me of this question. Are we subject to the state and county laws? We are subject to the state laws. However, they don't have anything about locations of dispensaries other than it's limited to 2 per Senate district. And the county rules we would not be subject to. And I think that Jackie Rouse shared some of the county regulations with you. Jackie, you can tell me if I'm wrong about that. And so also we've sent you all of the public comments we received on Monday. We didn't get any additional comments since Monday. And again, all of that information is available on eTrackit. And that concludes my remarks.
Dr. Nash, do you have at hand the map that shows the 1 mile radius from I can't remember what it was, 1 mile radius from the current dispensary? Was that what you prepared for the last hearing?
We had a map showing, hold on just 1 second, I'll pull it up. That shows zoning districts where it would be allowed. And that's the same one. I don't have that one, but let me look through my email and I will find it. I can't get my hands on it right away, but if we could go to the next question, I'll pull it up.
Sure, I have a question. So for other uses that are considered incompatible with things like schools and churches, the one that I could think of was sales and marketing of tobacco products to children, kind of thing. What typically is the radius that's proffered for that kind of regulation?
We don't have radiuses in our zoning code for any other uses. We do have some uses that are very restricted to maybe one zone. And those are things like adult bookstore where, I don't even think we have any in the city, but they're not permitted in very many places. And I don't know if Joel is on, but he can chime in. Is my understanding we aren't allowed to prohibit a use through zoning, but that if we can justify the restrictions based on the zoning district classification and the impact of the use, we can restrict it that way.
But what one do we have a radius for, though? You said we don't have one for any other.
Nothing.
Right.
what
We don't have radiuses for any of our
anything.
zoning districts. Radii.
Okay.
For some uses like bed and breakfast, we do have limits placed on how many there can be by block.
So are you saying that is there something preventing us from having doing things by a radius from a school or a church? Because, presumably if it's an incompatible use with those other establishments, we need a way to sort of do that fairly.
Mhm.
And so is it not, is there something preventing us, something else in the code preventing us from that sort of a strategy?
No, I don't think so. I think it would just be a concern if it was a de facto prohibition of the use in the city.
Well, I think you have to justify it. However, whatever distance you picked, it would have to have some significant justification that no doubt would have to have some sort of national research behind it. You couldn't pick a 20-mile radius for something that obviously doesn't have an effect, beyond 20 feet as an extreme example. So, it would have to be justified. But I was just curious if we had anything else that would give us guidance on a scheme like that.
That's all I can think of. Jackie, is there anything that comes to your mind?
Dr. Nash, you said something earlier about, can you hear me?
Yes.
You said something earlier about if something is prohibited, there has to be solid justification for it. And could you repeat what you said before? I think you used adult bookstores as the example, so that if adult bookstores could be relegated to one particular zone, for instance, that may be one way of minimizing their presence. Is that correct?
That's right.
But you went further and said there has to be a reason if there's a total prohibition.
It's my understanding that you can't prohibit a use altogether through
It comes
zoning.
out of land use case law that you can't generally prohibit a use from locating in a jurisdiction. We ran into that a few years back with a question about some other use, and I think it might have been adult bookstores. I can't remember exactly what it was. But
What about the tattoo parlors? We had tattoo parlor legislation this past year, and
right.
Why didn't we didn't bring that up during that time?
It's because it was permitted in some zones. As long as it's not totally prohibited throughout the municipality, I guess you can require them that they be in a certain zone or zones. Is that correct?
Right, but so one of the things that we did actually when we did the recodification in 2005 was, instead of having so many different uses, we grouped them. We created like categories like personal care establishments, and there's another one that has to do with general retail or something, and we started lumping all those uses in there. And I think the end thing about the tattoo parlors is that we did not I don't think we created a separate, I don't think we ever moved forward with that in the end, did we, Sally?
No, we didn't. We kept it as a personal care establishment.
Right, we just decided they could be allowed as personal care. There are other jurisdictions that do actually have distance limits, for example, on how close to like a church and school that you can have. Anne Arundel County has limits. They have limits on both like liquor stores, and they have limits on obviously on the medical marijuana. I sent you that information about proximity to other types of uses. They don't have, and they actually, through their liquor license laws, I believe, have, apply rules about proximity to other liquor stores, and you have to show that there's a need based, and proximity is one of the issues that's evaluated. But that's a specific thing with liquor license in many jurisdictions in the state. So, but we don't have, if we put distance proximity limits on things in that related to schools and churches in the city, Sally, put that map back up that had the 4,000 circles on it. We wouldn't have, it would be in many ways self-defeating in terms of being able to provide ordinary to the larger community.
Why not have things like this come through review, like the site be chosen, and then it comes through like for an exception for a permitted use, instead of doing carte blanche every area that's commercial in a certain zone of the city. Actually have it more, narrowed down where they find a piece of property and come to us, because we've had that happen numerous times over the last few years.
You could certainly make a recommendation that this, instead of being a permitted use, that this is a special exception use.
I think it's
Say
obvious.
that again, Sally, from the start, because I missed your first sentence.
You could certainly make the recommendation that this should be a special exception use instead of a permitted use.
And when it's a special exception, then it comes forward for review before approval, and therefore everything can get worked out, right?
Yes, any applicant would have to come to Board of Appeals for approval.
Board of Appeals, not the Planning Commission, though.
I think it's pretty evident that it probably is a special exception. This isn't a tobacco store, and it's not a liquor store, and I'm not sure if it's really been defined of what they are, and maybe they need to be defined. But is there anything preventing us from just adopting what the county does, or is the county just too restrictive? I mean, I would always think it's safer to do the more restrictive, and rather than the less restrictive. I don't know.
Right now, the way
what's the justification for the county to do it, not for us to do it?
We could adopt a similar methodology. We could not use exactly what they do, because right now, under their legislation, you would not be able to have any dispensaries in the city limits the way it's written. But we could use their methodology and modify it in certain ways so that some of the protections that are in there remain, but it doesn't completely disallow any dispensaries in the city.
Yeah, I'm looking at that document now, and the operative thing is 1 mile radius from any other dispensary. And I think we saw, I don't know if you had the 1 mile. Sally,
So-
you had a 1.5 and a 2, but not a 1.
Right, I think you're right. This is 1.5.
And could you remind me why we're looking at that again? Why the 1 or 1.5? Is that?
Well,
I know that was.
I'm looking at the county regulations. Number 1811-132-5 says the facility may not be located within 1 mile of another licensed premises of a licensed dispensary of medical cannabis. So they basically have a 1 mile radius or a 1 mile distance between dispensaries. And so I don't think we saw that presented. We saw 1.5 and 2, I believe, but not 1. So I don't know, so getting to your point.
Yeah, I think it was to get it out of Ward 3 was that.
1 mile may allow for, a couple, I don't know. Is this
Right.
1.5 miles?
So this is 1.5, and you can see you could have 2. So it's possible, a slightly smaller circle, maybe 3, although right now, remember, the whole Senate, there's the limit because of the only 2 per Senate district.
Yeah, but I mean, that is a current limitation, but limitations can always be changed in the future, I would think. I mean, look at Colorado. You got hundreds of them everywhere you go. You go out there skiing, they're all over the place. And there's a legal case going on between somebody looking to get a permit on General's Highway for another dispensary due to location and closeness. So you guys might want to look at that for a little historical record. It's actually current.
So I'm going to reiterate my concern about this radius from another one, that it sets up perverse incentives about, trying to get one someplace else so it won't be where I want it to be. So like, I'll get you to build one there, then you can't build one near me. It just sets up some really weird incentives. That's why I was pursuing this line of questioning about incompatible uses with something like schools, where, I think most people would agree, we don't want, we don't want that around school-age children who, wouldn't be allowed to do that, or we don't think that's a good thing. So that's why I was sort of getting at it from that angle, and it reduces kind of that weird incentive that's set up by saying, well, we don't really care where you put it, you just can't have them too close. So it's just weird.
So in the information that I sent you, I think I also pointed out what the county has proximity to schools. And I think there may be some other jurisdictions that also have proximity to churches. But on the other side of the coin, I will tell you that in researching this and trying to find regulations kind of on a statewide basis, one of the things that I discovered is that a number of jurisdictions chose not to adopt any new regulations, but just to allow the medical marijuana dispensaries that happen to be coming in their Senate district without making any code changes. So it seemed to be slim pickings in terms of finding regulations. And
so to reiterate for the regulations about districts, that would allow basically two in the Annapolis
currently
area.
it allows, they're allowed 2 per Senate district. However, part of what is written into the state law is that will all be reevaluated. The medical marijuana cannabis, the Medical Cannabis Commission, Maryland MMCC, has to present a report back to the state legislature, and there's a date certain for when they have to do that, reporting on not they feel there's an expanded need for more medical dispensaries, so that, and so it's as Ben said, it's not forever number, and there are other, actually there are 2 allowed per Senate district, but also as there are a few other potential licenses out there for dispensaries, because there are 15 processor licenses and 15 grower licenses. And I think it's the processors, I can't remember if it's the processors or growers, they can also get a dispensary license. And that I do not think has to be specific to any particular area. I think they're allowed to locate it, where they want to. I mean, it's subject to approval by the state. It's very heavily regulated by the state. So,
right. So the way it's set up now is obviously there's one not in the city but close. So for District 30, there could be one more. District 30 is, it's pretty big.
well, okay.
Hold on a second. I'm just trying to walk through this here so we're all kind of level set. So we have the one. There could be another one in District 30, which includes, Annapolis, Edgewater. I don't exactly know the boundaries of District 30, but
I'll look that up.
I'll get
the map.
30 is pretty large.
Well, Alex, just to set the record straight on that, actually all 102 dispensary licenses for the districts are already considered to be approved by the commission. They have a 2-stage approval process. This information came from their website, so it's not, And they do, in stage one, they call it pre-approval, but they've actually assigned the license to you, and they have a whole list of requirements that you have to meet through that stage. And then once then you move on to the second stage that includes a public hearing, but they consider all 102 district licenses to be issued, to be committed at this point, and there are none of those available.
Okay, so in a sense, this whole discussion is really moot until the state decides to do something different.
Well, unless one of the growers or processors decided they wanted to open a dispensary. I mean, in Annapolis or something else changed. So that's my impression.
And I wouldn't say moot, because I mean, we got to think smartly and plan for the future
Right.
accordingly, right? Because all that can change, all that can change. And we can change too. We can always change. So, go ahead, Alex.
Well, I mean, what I was saying is that if it's moot in the sense of somebody being able to open a dispensary someplace in the city in the near future, maybe this isn't the right time for us to do anything about this. If it's from a practical standpoint, maybe sometimes the wait and see attitude. Maybe
That's a thought I had too, but it's a thought we need to. Yeah, let's table all the thoughts, obviously. But yeah, I'm with you. That thought crossed my mind.
Well, it always makes sense to be, to anticipate what seems to be the obvious future.
True.
And the obvious future is in some point in time, there's going to be somebody else going to move into this senatorial district. And then at some further off future time, medical marijuana will become recreational like it is in whatever, half of the states in this union already. And two more, Virginia and New York, coming on this very soon. So, I mean, it's a policy issue, we've been asked for our attitudes on zoning these kinds of dispensaries. And I think we'd be fools if we didn't look at the fact that there's going to be more or could be more unless we think that we recommend a different policy. So I think that punting is not really, at this point, is not fair to the council even.
Well, I wouldn't say that taking a wait and see attitude is punting. I think it's more, we just don't want to make a rash, some sort of rash decision. As I said in the last meeting, that from a planning standpoint, which is our wheelhouse, we're concerned with our use is compatible, and our use is, how does it affect other areas of planning, traffic and all of that stuff. And whether we like this use or not, it's, we think it's a good a good thing to have in the city or not, it's a value judgment at this point. Because clearly half people think it's a good use, half the people don't think it's good use.
Well, we don't have to look at use and whether it's a good use and whether we like it or whether we think it has moral value. I think we can look at the things that you just mentioned, which is, they tend to attract traffic. It's in the same category as a pharmacy or a convenience store. And
so a lot of
so does that make sense? Those are kinds of reasons to if we want to do anything.
Right, but so let's follow that logic. If we're not talking about any particular application, so if somebody wants to open one of these and they put in an application to, say this use was allowed, they put in an application, they're still going to have to go through the standard application where they're going to have to, do the analysis of all the things in our code that talk about things like traffic and setbacks and all this stuff in our code.
I don't know that. No, and only if it's new construction. What if they go into an existing building?
I still think you can look at it as a special exception. There's no issue there.
No, but the point is, I think we have. So I'm addressing Alderwoman Pindell Char's many comments that we were forwarded and the extensive write-up of the things we talked about last time, and things like traffic. Those I think are handled very well within our code for any other type of establishment, whether it's new construction or existing construction. And
Wait a
I
minute,
think-
what if
No,
somebody?
let me finish.
Okay.
And very much like what the staff report said, that they're considering these types of businesses to be something similar to what a drugstore might have, the type of traffic or something like that. And if people think that's an incorrect assumption, that's certainly up for discussion.
I think it's certainly an assumption.
Right. I mean, so we can discuss that, but what I'm concerned about is saying that this is a use that we just don't, we want to limit someplace. And if we're going to do that, we have to say, well, what is it about this use with respect to a planning process that we don't want? Do we want to keep this out of the view of school-aged children? That's one of the things we're tasked with is the effect of any, the planning effects on health and safety of the community. And so that's the kind of thing that I think we should be looking at. Do we want these things, do they have to be far away from schools and churches because it has a very negative effect on the community in that regard? But all of the other things that like traffic, those will be handled around any specific application for somebody who wants to put one of these things in an approved place. So anyway,
No, it's permitted. The legislation says it's permitted. So there's no, it's just a business license.
Unless you do a special exception.
Unless you do a special exception. And if we do a special exception, I think that we should think and recommend the factors which go into making the decision on the special exception. So that
Can't you already today, without any changes, if somebody applied a week ago, couldn't they have applied with a special exception to put one in somewhere in the city already? Sally?
No,
No?
right now we would say it's the legislation is making its way through council. You have.
What about 6 months ago?
No, we'd say that use requires new legislation.
New legislation, because it's not anywhere, because it's not already existing in our code. Okay, so, what I see here is a lot of people, and obviously we still got a lot more testimony and stuff to get to. I don't want to go into total debate at the moment, but Bob, go ahead and finish what you're doing. I don't want to cut you off.
Okay. I'd like to hear it all. I'm not quite sure where to go.
All right, let's get to hearing it all. But before we get to hearing it all, any other things commissioners want to put in people's minds before we hear more evidence? Go ahead, Mr.
Well, I'd like to see about the school and church thing without just looking at a mile radius. I mean, like Baltimore is 500 feet. I'd like to see other options and see if it's still prohibitive to say 750 feet, 1,000 feet from the school, and see what we come up with there as well.
And what I'd like to see also, a couple of things is like, okay, similar to what Mr. Iams requested is, so what if we made it so just so these things aren't clustered, okay, but they're permitted, is what would it look like if it was a quarter mile from any existing dispensary, a half a mile? What does that do to it? Even though this would be the only place in the code where there's distances that are specified. But still, I think that would be an important piece of data to know before you go blundering forth into saying, "Oh, you can't have it anywhere near a church." And then the other thing is, well, I don't know. I have other questions for later.
And I'm with you, Bob, to see those. But honestly, I'll bring you back to Rhonda giving some presentation of the council 6 months ago. It says we're like this in the city. We're all so close. So we've got so many churches, schools. If you put a quarter a mile, you're talking,
Can't be
1,500 feet. So, and the one from Germantown, what is that, Monarch is 666, just to give you a ballpark in your head. But I think even at a quarter mile, you're going to be hitting something. So that radius starts to become a problem from even if people want it, then you're almost setting yourself up. You can't have it for people that want it.
I would recommend you don't necessarily try to solve that right here, but that you make a recommendation about what you're trying to accomplish, and then staff can figure out how to do that exactly. I mean, if you want to limit them based on proximity to school, you know, we can fiddle with the circles and figure out what works, where, you know, there could at least hypothetically be a dispensary in the city, but the schools are protected. Or if you want to say it's a special exception, or you can add standards that the use is subject to as well. That's another option. So, you know, you have different paths available to regulate this, and I would focus on the path you want to take, and I can figure out the exact details later.
Remember what you just said and say that again later when we come back to debate, and we need that. So, and I'm writing down that. Okay. Is there anything else staff has to present that we had asked for staff to present?
Not that I know of.
All right. Well, if you come across it, we can always come back to you. And again, from this little bit of debate, we've so far, before we go into the rest of the council members, we've come across it looks like a very tenuous item that we may want to look, instead of a carte blanche, we may approval for certain zoning. We might want to look at an ability to always have a review to make it fit later on. So we'd have to, that would be a special exception. That's something we just talked about. So let's take all that and think about that while we move into the rest of the evidence. And we'll start by going from the supporters, or actually supporters of the legislation, then to what we asked from Ms. Pendle Charles from the last meeting, and then the rest of the council members at that. So starting off, the supporters of legislation are the mayor, Mr. Arnett, and Mr. Gay. Which one of you would like to start first? Go ahead. With anything you need to add.
Seeing Dewan doesn't have himself out muted, and I am, I'll say, as a sponsor, I always like to present myself to the Planning Commission to ask me questions. I don't like to really advocate for my own legislation. I will say that in my ward, I've received no objections or concerns about this legislation. I always enjoy listening to the Planning Commission debate. The different circles was informative to me. It looks like if you put any kind of distance requirement, you pretty much obviate the ability to have this. I have used cannabis as a cream to apply to my knee, so I am a user of medical cannabis in that regard, and I do think that that's something that we should make people would allow people to have. I got mine online, so I didn't get it through a dispensary, so you can get it that way. But I think that this is something that is legal and is going to become more and more legal, and I think we should allow our residents to have access to the legal use of these materials.
Thank you, Mr. Arnett. Anyone else from the supporters of the legislation, sponsors of the legislation?
I'll go next. Thanks to the members of the commission. So I just wanted to touch on some of the things that we discussed in the last meeting and some of the things discussed today. You know, starting with some points that I think, well, I'll start here. I'm concerned when I hear language as it relates to creating recommendations to fit the needs of individual council members or individual wards. As I've been told by the Office of Law, that they usually frown upon creating specific policy to meet the needs of certain wards. I remember back to when we were discussing the ADU legislation, and I suggested because there were some concerns in other wards that we only put it here, or well, how about we do it in just Ward 6, or how about we just, and the Office of Law frowned upon that, you know, for legal reasons. And so I'd just be concerned about that. As it relates to the schools and churches, the county legislation, which I have pulled up here, and you can pull up on the county's website. It's Bill 719, introduced by Councilwoman Allison Pickert. The facility may not be located within 750 feet of the lot line of a public or private school, the lot line of real property owned by the Board of Education, and it is 500 feet for individual residential communities. I think that when you start to get into, obviously, the size of our city, when you start to talk about a mile and a mile and a half, it completely depletes the purpose of the legislation. And while I understand that there may be some moral hesitancy, I don't believe that's the place of the Planning Commission. I think that is left up to the council to decide those individual policy concerns as it relates to the churches, the schools, and things like that. And I only state that because when we start to talk about creating specific qualifications or special exemptions for these businesses, that's like borderline business discrimination, because I personally feel that this business is against my moral standings. I believe that it should be subject to additional qualifications. I don't think that the city should get involved in that. And I think if they do, a lawsuit should be filed. What's the difference in a liquor store? For example, in Ward 6, middle school children walk past the Robin Wood or Annapolis Wine and Spirits every day. There are advertisements plastered on the front of the building, easy access to the parking lot. There are no gates, limited security features. What's the difference? What's the difference than a child walking into a Rite Aid or Walgreens with their parent? They have access, although you wouldn't be able to walk behind the counter, just like you wouldn't be able to walk behind the counter in a medical dispensary. There's opioids. There's prescription medication. So I think that when we, create, and follow behind stereotypical views of marijuana, it's a dangerous place to be in as it relates to the city regulating the use, just in this, as it relates to the Planning Commission, the use of this business, the use of this facility. I'd also, I sent to Sally, I'm not sure if you guys have received it. I sent Maryland rules from section 1062.27, which basically outlined everything for licensed dispensary on the premises from 1062.27 through 1062.27.999, as it relates to security lighting, the rooms, the security of premises, video surveillance, just all of the rules and regulations that are required for the licensed dispensaries. Also submitted to you Maryland medical marijuana law from the Maryland Normal website, which goes into detail as it relates to caregivers, who is able to administer medical marijuana outside of a facility. I've submitted a 23-page document, which I went through today, as it relates to the use of medical marijuana on school facilities, and how caregivers are able to administer medical marijuana to students who meet the qualifications on school premises. I've submitted charts as it relates to the number of registered patients in the state of Maryland that use the medical marijuana cards. I've also reached out to the Maryland medical cannabis commission. I've scheduled a meeting with them for next Tuesday to get additional details to see if they are able to break it down to the individual municipalities, focusing on more of Annapolis. If we could get data to see how many residents have, medical marijuana cards and things like that. But basically what I'm saying is that we've done the research. I think there is definitely compromise to be made amongst the council in distances to places of worship in schools. But as other jurisdictions have shown, no one's taken the steps to say you can't be a mile within, the distance of a school or whatever. Everything is broken down into individual feet. As the individual councilman alluded to earlier, 500 feet for Baltimore, 750 feet for the county. So I would just hope that we are open-minded and take into consideration how important this is, and that it could provide benefits for our residents and constituents.
Okay, is there anyone else that's a sponsor or support of legislation that would like to speak? Okay, we'll go into Ms. Charles, Pendle Charles. We had asked her for some information from her district from the last meeting, so we'll give her the first chance to go next.
As you all know, I submitted several documents late Monday night to Dr. Nash and Ms. Rouse to be submitted to you all. I am hopeful that you all have had a chance to read it. There were two legal briefs, policy, and some other documents that I had prepared, some based on the arguments put forth a couple of years ago with the county. But I'm just going to kind of, and within the notes I took at the last meeting that you all had 2 weeks ago, I responded to Alderman Gay's three components that he put forth in support of it. But what I'm going to do today, if you don't mind, and if you have some more questions, I answered your questions within those notes. I think it was about 6 or 7 pages. And so the answers are there, and I would request that those documents be incorporated into the record of the Planning Commission as well. But I'm going to go through a few things that I'm hearing today that really concern me. And I do know that the county does have a radius, and what it really boils down to with the county, you could basically have, because it goes 1,000 feet southwesterly, I think, you could really have a dispensary right there where Walgreens is, because there's no distance between schools or anything like that. It moves, the line moves in a southwesterly direction. And I think I have that on page 3 or 4 in that document that I presented. I think the difference here is, and right now I'll put it on the record.
Top of the peanut butter jar.
Oh, I thought that was a question. Sorry. Anyway,
that's classic.
I think the difference, well, I know the difference. And well, first of all, let me go back and say, at this point, there is no debate about the positives or the negatives or the medicinal purposes of marijuana. That's not the issue here. But there is a difference between the liquor stores and that sort of thing, because as we know, federally, marijuana is illegal. But I'm not going to belabor that point, but that is the difference between a liquor store. The other thing I want to mention is too, we are right on the border of the county. Whatever the county, unlike the other jurisdictions, like the other wards that we have in the city, we border a good portion of the county. And whatever the county wants to do, if they want to put one on General's Highway, if there's no real distance requirements, that's where it's going to go. There's one in Edgewater. There's one right there on the Ward 3 parking lot. But what I want to say is, what I really find, I guess, and the residents find offensive, is that it unfairly impacts Ward 3. Now, I'm not disparaging any residents of any other wards, don't get me wrong. But I could see an argument could be made that if it really doesn't affect my ward, but it's over there in Ward 3, and they could be limitless to a certain degree, you're not going to get any complaints in other wards. Put it over in Ward 3. I'm not saying that's what's going on, but that's a legitimate argument because it's not in my backyard. The other thing is too, we're losing sight of the comp plan. The comp plan promotes preserve and enhance community character. When we did the Upper West Street sector study, when we had the comp plan, when the residents said this does not comport, these type of establishments do not comport with what the people want. Regardless of what we look at distances, regardless if we look at radiuses, regardless of whether we look at schools or churches, the bottom line is the comp plan says that we preserve and enhance community character. Ward 3 is saying cannabis or any more cannabis dispensaries does not preserve and enhance our community character. Now, laws can be changed at any time. The state laws, the county laws, we have no control over that. We're right on the county line. If the county decides that they want to put a dispensary nearby on General's Highway, we're subject to that. No other wards are subject to that. The other thing is too, we don't know in that vein what's coming. Now, as far as arguments, as far as disenfranchising businesses, I mean, I'll address that as far as we talked about the moral issue the last time. And if we, and I put this in the document, if we discount the moral issue, and I'm not saying we should include it, but we shouldn't discount it, because then you're disenfranchising pastors and congregants. So everybody, excuse me for 1 second, please. Excuse me for 1 second, please.
No problem. Go ahead.
Thank you, thank you. So you're really disenfranchising pastors and congregants as well. So we, and our country was built on a spiritual problem that we had, and I'm not going to get into the arguments about that. So based on everything that I've submitted, like I said, in many ways, we're getting off the subject because we're looking at preserving and enhancing the community character of Ward 3. And that definitely, an argument can be made that a dispensary violates that. And when we had the Upper West Street sector study, the people were adamant. There are certain things that we are not comfortable with, that we don't want. And why should we be unfairly burdened, for lack of a better term, with this? Now, we've talked about all kinds of scenarios, you know, special exceptions, moving the line, looking at radiuses, not looking at radiuses. But that to me is not the core issue. The core issue is that one ward is being unfairly impacted. I can see where other wards arguably are not going to complain. But the residents, and I've said this before and I said it the last time, Ward 3 does not complain. We're placid people. On the council, I'm not a complainer. I usually go along to get along. There are not too many times you don't see me complaining, that you see me complaining. But when the residents are as angry as they are, and they have made it so, and they had a community meeting last week, 2 weeks ago, it was between 40 and 60 people, and they were adamant about it. The distances that our residents have to walk to Walgreens, because a lot of the parking lot is being taken up by Gold Leaf, and the list goes on. And I think the documents that I prepared are exhaustive, respond to every argument that I've heard before. I try to respond to the arguments that I've heard today. And I think that pretty much settles the way Ward 3 feels about the entire matter. We're not going to get into a discussion about the medicinal purposes of it. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So, I mean, I really appreciate the comments from your constituents, and I am sympathetic definitely to how they feel. The question that I would ask for you is how can we respond in a way that is sensitive to their concerns, but is still, one, legal and also fair? So, we've heard issues about, we can't do things by ward. We have to, we have to operate within the laws that we have about things that can happen in certain zones, et cetera. So I guess I would turn that to you as what would you suggest we do that responds to your constituents' desires that could actually be implemented?
Well, Mr. Pline,
A
I'm
little
going
bit
to
of a
answer.
lot.
I'm going to answer your question this way. The 1998 comprehensive plan indicated that they were wrong, basically, in how Ward 3 was treated. The way that the zoning was done has resulted in what we see today. It's an ugly mess on West Street. You come into the 4 zones into the city, and Ward 3, West Street, is the ugliest of all. And so, what we've been subject to a plethora of fast food restaurants. We've been forced into too many traffic accidents every day, too many fatalities. The Upper West Street sector study bore that out. And so the residents are really, frankly, now sick of it. They've had enough. They've said, okay, we've accepted all of this stuff. It took us 20 years to get a traffic signal, 20 years. And that was an effort that I was determined to get. And so they are angry, and their anger has goes back to 20 years at least. It comes from the 1998 comp plan. And so they're saying, we're sick and tired, as Fannie Lou Hamer said, we're sick and tired of being sick and tired. We've had enough. We have been dumped on, stepped on, trampled on, accepted things that other wards would not accept. We don't have the strength to fight it legally nor financially. And so we are now, I'm advocating for them now, who are saying we've had enough. Enough is enough. Come out here and look at it. It's ugly. It's ugly. I had someone come.
So let me ask the question. Let me ask the question again. I don't disagree with anything that you said, and I'm very sensitive to those concerns. But I'm asking you, what specifically would you have us do to address those concerns? That's we're asking you to do that. We can't just say, okay, it's not our wheelhouse to say, oh, we don't like this and we're not going to do it. I mean, so what should we do? Should we rezone Ward 3? I mean, I don't know. You got to tell us how you want us to respond to this.
Well, I think the amendment that I submitted is the response. And to be honest, and I said it at the last meeting, the residents are angry with me about the amendment. But what I told them was, I have to be a realist. Just like you're saying, what I'm trying to find the middle ground, and I'm trying as best I can. And I think the documents that I submitted are ammunition enough to be able to say, okay, the 2-mile radius with and you all can, no one's saying you can't use radius as a determinative. Nobody's saying that. There's nothing that prohibits that. But what I'm saying is the 2-mile radius that I have submitted, I think is enough. And we're going to be subjected probably to whatever the county does. I mean, that little plot of land, we had to accept. Well, we fought that, but that didn't work. And now we're paying the price for that. And so what people are saying is, we've had enough. And they're basically saying, Rhonda, I don't care what you do, we don't want it. We don't want it. We've accepted enough. We've been, in some ways, the stepchild of the city, and we're done with it. And if you look over the country, historically, African-American communities, this is not unusual. It is not unusual. And that's what people look at. And so they're tired. They're sick and tired of being sick and tired. The amendment that I've submitted, The 1 mile does not help us at all. Maybe 1.5 helps. Maybe 1.4 helps, but the 1 mile does not help
How does the 1 mile not help you?
because we can still end up with dispensaries in our ward.
Where?
Going towards the design district.
Further in West Street?
Yes, moving towards Ward
A
2.
mile and a half from the current dispensary?
Yeah,
Okay.
it might be 1.4, 1.5, but it's still within our ward. I'll tell you this, there are people in my ward that say they don't want it anywhere, but I say I have to be a realist.
Does
I have
the
to be a
design
realist.
district, does the design district zoning permit medical cannabis dispensaries?
That's a question for Sally. That's my understanding.
Well, because what this legislation proposes that it's limited to whatever it's called, professional, I can't remember what it's called.
C2P, I believe. Sally? Sally's gone. Any other? I believe it's C2P.
So that's the question. Just because it's in Ward 3 doesn't mean that it's going to be permitted.
Yep, so it would be allowed in the industrial district
Okay,
and BCE.
okay.
C2P and BCE, is that correct, Sally?
Okay.
Wouldn't be allowed in the industrial district, Sally.
Oh, is that BCE?
BCE, Chinkapin Round Road, all along Chinkapin Round Road is BCE. As you go off of Chinkapin Round Road, on like to George Avenue and Margaret and all that is industrial there, and it wouldn't be allowed there. But all of Chinkapin Round Road is BCE, just as what Upper West Street is.
So is that map correct for Ward 3 as depicted, or is it incorrect?
Yes,
The blue portion,
sorry.
my understanding is the blue portion, it's allowed.
Yes, I misspoke. Sorry, that blue portion there is BCE, and that would be allowed there.
And Jackie, you concur?
Yes, I concur.
Okay. So, and again, to reiterate for the public and all the commissioners, these zones that would be allowed in are BCE and
All of our commercial districts,
C2P, C2, all
except
C1.
in P, it would be a special exception,
C2P.
and it would not
so
be allowed in C2P.
Not in C2P, but in C1P, special exception.
Well, all the other business districts, B1,
Well,
B2, B3.
Okay, I know this is a crazy idea, but the simple solution of keeping it out of Ward 3, maybe I'm missing something here, is not to allow it in BCE. The only place we have BCE is Ward 3. Isn't that correct, Sally?
No, I see blue all over the place.
No,
That's
those other districts. The only BCE is in Ward 3. However, Jackie, there are other places where it could be for P zone, but it's special exception.
Well, then don't allow it in BCE or P. I mean, you still are allowing it in all the other districts, B1, B2, C2, it would still be allowed in a number of commercial districts. Eliminate BCE and P, professional office district. It's not really primarily a retail, we have a lot of other retail uses, I wouldn't think.
And the C2P around Safeway too.
And
That's in my ward. Safeway is in my ward.
Yeah, and while you're talking about it from staff, I want to throw this in there. If you put if it was approved with radius in order to keep it out of Ward 3, but then the existing permit holder decided, okay, well, it's approved in Annapolis now with a radius, but I'm the permit holder. I could close my gold leaf store there in the county and move somewhere else into the city in Ward 3 because I am the holder of that radius restriction. Is that correct? Is that a possibility?
Well, I think it's a whole lot more complicated than that.
Sure it is.
To move, a location under the state regulations. I mean, they're incredibly complicated, and I don't think part of what you get with your state approval is approval to be in a certain location also.
But if the laws change and open up, and you've got
if
money,
the laws change, the laws. Yeah,
you could up and move it, and I want to bring that to Miss Charles's view. that if that
Right.
permit holder then only has to look at a radius, that radius is of themselves, and they could up and move into your ward. If you're thinking the radius would protect you, maybe it wouldn't.
Right.
I mean, if what Jackie is saying, BCE, and I think the other one was, because we've got the blue and we got a couple pinks in there. If that could take it out, then I'm good with that.
It's just a suggestion, but we don't allow every single use in every single zoning district in the city. I mean, that approach has been used before. I mean, for example, example would be in an R1 district, the only housing type allowed by right is a single family. You can't do multifamily, say, in an R1 district. That's part of the whole purpose of having zoning districts is that you restrict certain uses to certain districts. It's just a thought.
And
I
state
have
that
a
thought
quick
again for clarity before we move to Butler. State that thought again, please, Jackie.
That my thought was that if we're looking at, I mean, if the Ward 3 issue of, and I really respect Rhonda's opinion and her representation of the people who live in her ward, and she has some really valued arguments about the entitlement, and even on a national basis of how traditionally much of the zoning that has been done on minority areas has allowed the least desirable uses in a jurisdiction in those areas where they're predominantly African American or other minorities. I mean, I've been to workshops on a national basis at APA conventions where that was about that kind of disenfranchisement in zoning. So having said that, the BCE district, that's only in Rhonda's ward, as I understand it.
But all that blue is not BCE.
I think, Sally, the blue is all the areas that it's being proposed to be allowed, correct?
It's more than BCE in those blue areas.
Right.
Yes, and I think we have a problem because there's actually also some B2 in Ward 3 and PM2. It's starting to get more. I mean, it would be easy to just say BCE, but there are other districts in her ward where it would be permitted.
Right. So it would be more. My point is a lot that those blue squares are a lot of different areas, zoning areas.
Right.
That would be
You're right.
possible.
You are right. It was a theory. It does limit possibilities in Rhonda's ward, but
It reduces
to not
it for
have it in
sure.
BCE.
And that's my whole point regarding, I would assume, the 98 comp plan. We're suffering behind, and the comp plan, the 2009 comp plan said that people have now become frightened by what has happened with the 98 plan. This is your perfect example of the frightenness of my residents. This is it. This says it. This speaks to that totally. This is what we were afraid of when we didn't know what we were afraid of.
So my question is really to Sally. Why, and Alderman Gay mentioned it earlier, the law department frowns upon banning a particular use in a particular ward, but is it illegal? There's frowning upon, and then the legal issue. Do we know whether it's legal to be able to say, we just don't want cannabis dispensaries in Ward 3?
Under case law, it's unconstitutional.
Do we have
if you follow land use case law, it's been ruled unconstitutional many places in the country.
But there's nothing to prevent us from just saying 2 miles between dispensaries, and then therefore it pushes it to another ward.
No, that's not limiting. You can't limit by jurisdiction. Within a jurisdiction by ward. If you allow a use in, like, say, a B2 district, you can't say, well, it's only allowed in B2 in this ward, but not in that ward. It's unconstitutional. I mean,
No,
that's all
they didn't suggest
that's
it.
all the land use law I've ever seen has said that.
But that's not,
The more and more I hear stuff, the more and more I start thinking about that special exception where any future want or application for when somebody finds a piece of property they want to put one on would become to the building board of appeals, and then you get city.
No,
review,
the Board of
input. I'm sorry, the building, what is it again?
Just the Board of Appeals.
The Board of Appeals, sorry. And then you get review, and then everybody in that area that it would be going to could then get their say-so, and, it gets a
But
review.
how often are special exceptions denied?
That's a
Well, for
question.
more controversial uses, and I'm even including things like restaurants, liquor stores, they do get denied.
But how
Sometimes they
many
get
have been
approved.
denied in Ward 3?
Good point.
I remember.
I served on the Board of
was
Appeals for
denied.
about 6 years.
Rhonda, we did have at least one special exception in your ward. I remember a number of years ago, and Sally will remember it, that was denied. It was that deli that wanted to serve liquor that was going to be close to the elementary school. I think they actually, when it was moving towards denial, they might have withdrawn the application. Do you remember that? And
No,
then
I
there was
remember-
Henry. And you remember Henry's Liquors when they wanted to relocate into the shopping center, and we recommended denial of that. And
I wasn't on the.
right. That was before your time, so it has
Yeah.
happened. It is not that common, but here's another thing an additional one of Jackie's suggestions about this. You don't have to just say it's permitted every place, or we have uses that might be. Like say you take restaurants, like in the MX zone, a restaurant is permitted, and the only thing that requires special exception approval is live entertainment. But there are wards where we say if you can only have as a permitted use a restaurant up to 50 seats, hours of operation till midnight. You can establish, you can do that with any use. You could say that it is permitted in B1 and B2, or you could say it's permitted subject to standards, but then in another district, it's a special exception. You can craft legislation, but that would alleviate some of your concerns.
Jackie, in theory, that sounds fine, but it doesn't operate that way. And I don't want to call out wards, but there's certain wards who have the muscle, who have the residents, who have the money, the financing to say, we don't want this. We don't have that. We have to depend on either the planning commission to hear us, or the staff to hear us, or the council to hear us. But when we get into a situation where one ward is impacted overwhelmingly more than others, we don't have those tools to fight it. We don't. And so we're at the mercy. And that's what Jackie sees throughout the country when she goes to these conferences. You
Ms.
look all
Rouse,
over the place.
What Ms. Rouse is suggesting, I hate to cut you off, but what Ms. Rouse just suggested is what you also find what you depend upon. And that is, if there are standards, clear standards that are written in, it's permitted subject to standards. The planning staff looks at the application and says, has it met the standard? And it's not some vague standard, but it's something fairly precise. If the legislation is written with clarity, and in some cases with quantified detail, then the planning staff approves or disapproves it. But what's important here is to set the policy. Not
Come out here and explain it to my residents.
And
Come out here and explain it to the residents.
Well, I would be happy to, but you're perfectly capable of describing.
They're not listening to me. They're not even listening to me.
Well, then they're not going to listen to me. So then what's the point?
Well, and we can't, as commissioners, we can't talk to any residents.
Oh, I know
until this
that.
passes,
Unfortunately. Chairman Sale, I do know that. I mean, but I was
I know you know
being
that.
somewhat facetious. But what I'm saying is they don't want it. They've taken enough. They've had it.
Right, we get that.
Okay,
You've said,
fine.
hold on,
You've heard that over and over again. Having heard that, I would like to pick up on something that Dr. Nash suggested before, which is that what we look at is what is it that we think are our goals on a policy planning level? What are our goals? What do we want to see from something like this? And then put it into the laps of the planning staff to come up with the mechanisms that enact those goals. We don't have to decide whether it's a mile or it's a half a mile or it's a mile and 2/3. But what we have to decide is we don't want these things clustered. We don't want them as ubiquitous as liquor stores, for instance. We don't want them within, I don't know, walking distance, on a walking path from a middle school. Those are the kinds of things, we think that they should be somewhat separated from residential areas. We think that they either should or should not have parking, or they should or should not be on public bus lines. But we don't have to come up with the specific mechanism to put that into place. What we do is this something that started at the very beginning of this discussion when Mr. Pline was talking about, as planners, what do we look at? And when we're involved in a use situation zoning system that we have here, and we're dealt with a use problem right here. And there's whether we like it or not, there's morals, always morals involved in these use situations. We don't think that a professional office building should back up to somebody's backyard. Well, that's a moral situation. And whether we say we're not talking morals or not, we are talking morals. When Ms. Charles says that we're disenfranchising pastors, I don't quite understand it, because we're also disenfranchising all the people who want a marijuana dispensary. So I think we should focus in on, from a planning perspective, what do we think is the right thing to do when you were going to be getting pressures for this type of retail operation? And we're going to get them. So I would propose from the beginning, the one thing that stuck out in my mind that is it's not a good idea to cluster these things. It's okay that there's one in Ward 3. It's okay that there's one in Ward 8. It's okay that there's one in Ward 2. It's okay there's one downtown. Okay? But spread them out so that you don't have them everywhere as ubiquitous as a liquor store is.
I don't have a problem with that at all.
Well,
because we've already got one.
I would like to look at other policies that make some sense. Do we think that a standard distance from residences should be set? Do we think that a distance, not that we need to set the distance at this point, but that a distance in some way from schools? Now, one of the problems with schools, churches, and daycares is it's a de facto prohibition, which is unconstitutional. So that's off the table. But apparently, according to the county rules, you can set some sort of proximity or distance from a public school. Fine. Then that's a standard. That's a policy planning goal that we can articulate and set, and leave it into it's. I think it'd be. I usually don't like to punt. But putting this into the hands of staff to actually begin to work out the legislative nature, and then there'll be the horse trading that goes on with the council people, and that's how the legislation will get done. We don't have to write that legislation. But as planners, we can look at something. And like I said, clustering is not a good idea.
All right.
Perhaps distance from a residence or residential lot line is maybe not a good idea. So right. How would you like to proceed, Mr. Sale? What process would you like to see?
Well, we still haven't heard all of the people who want to speak. We always kind of going into the debating, which is at the end. But I appreciate your concerns there. I had I agree with a lot of what you said, and the public probably don't understand all that. But what we do as a planning commission is we make recommendations on this item. So if we approve or recommend disapproval, it's going to be a recommendation to the city council to then handle this legislation. So we're here with the planning and zoning department and our commission, and we're more savvy with these zoning regulations, standards, and things. So that's why this comes in front of us, so we can make educated, smart decisions with everybody's input and push it towards the city council for their future decisions. So that's a point for the public right now. Ms. Pendel Charles, I had a question for you in the past, is if you could find out some information from businesses that are around Gold Leaf.
I tried to do that. I reached out to several but I didn't get a response. And what I go back to is, businesses, like I say, are there 9 to 5. The residents are there 24/7, 366. They've got to deal with this on a daily basis. And I will say this, we've got some, in fact, this morning, the mayor and I and some community folks walked in that area. And it is deplorable. And so deplorable till one of the persons said, it doesn't necessarily look like a third world country, but it looks like a second world. And it was bad in that same
what
area.
specifically are you talking about?
Upper West Street, the parking, the business complex that we're talking about. I went through there the other day and I looked and looked. It is not good looking at all. The signs have hung down. There's no more sign saying what even the name of the business complex is. Across the street, we've got an encampment of homeless, unfortunately. I think they're not there, maybe because of the weather. The trash, the garbage behind there, because honestly, I've never walked back there until today, was deplorable. That whole area up there is horrible.
Around Gold Leaf, is it because of the store or anything related to the store?
We've got some homeless people there that the city, we have reached out to them. We've got some businesses there who have complained about that is affecting their business. I contacted or attempted to contact the owner representative. I got no response. The shopping area across the street, we went behind there. It's a total mess. We're trying to get together a group to clean that up. But you have West Street with people. Is
any of this directly related to the establishment of the pot store that exists right there, or do you feel that it is? Or
yeah, it's right across the street.
Okay, so you weren't able to get in touch with any of the businesses, or they didn't respond to you?
No, I did not.
Okay, parking was a major issue. I've gone to the same stores around there. Parking is horrendous to try to get a spot at the Walgreens where I go shop for my stuff, or get a salmon sandwich from the little deli next door. So that I've noticed that, and you'd mentioned that, I believe. Also, the handicap spots, you said a lot of those were taken up. Traffic in and out of there is obviously increased. How about smell or anything? Have you noticed a smoke, or has there been any complaints about that?
Well, yeah, I did get some from the residents, and you had mentioned something about pursuing that, and I did go through Sally and Dr. Dash, and I think they were supposed to maybe follow up with the county and the state, because we don't have the mechanism in the city to take a look at that. The air quality, that was another issue that you asked about. I did address all of those in that 7-page minutes from the last meeting.
Right, which the public is, hopefully they read, but if not, I'm trying to bring out those items here so the public can hear it as the video goes on.
So I addressed everything. I attempted to address everything that you brought up at the last meeting.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
In the third ward, there's you have the luxury, or some may say not the luxury, of having multiple commercial type zones, which fall into those blue squares that we've had, more than just BCE. You have some C areas and whatnot where the legislation would actually approve it. So we've talked about earlier, you heard us talking about maybe limiting in what zones that it actually could be limited in, versus the legislation being so wide open at the moment in comparison to that option. We've heard your statements for that. And we've seen a lot of comments that have been submitted in from your district, and we will show those later on as we go through. Is there anything else you wish to present at the moment to the commissioners before we go on to other council members?
No, like I said, I would ask that they be incorporated into the record, all the documents that I submitted, as well as the letters as well. I know, like I said, Greater Parole Community Association had a community meeting. It was anywhere about 40 to 60 people on there. No one on that call said that they wanted it. Everybody was adamant about not wanting it. And so
So you haven't had one supporter for it?
not one, not one.
Okay. Do any other commissioners have any questions of Alderwoman Charles? Okay, thank you very much, Alderman Pindell Charles, for your information there. That was very widely open and well received by many of the commissioners, I presume.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Gay, thank you as well, Mr. Arnett. Now we'll move on. We have other city council members here in representation of large groups. The next one that would like to speak, I believe Ward 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but I'm here to observe, I'm here to listen, I'm here to learn.
Okay. And in your area, your ward, if we could bring up the map, the blue map, please, Sally, or whoever's got the share screen. And let's take a look at Ward 2. And where would this, as the legislation is currently written, where could it possibly go? Not based on any of the county rules or anything else. Just look at, basics.
Possibly West Annapolis, Giddings Avenue, maybe behind Grawls.
Okay, so obviously all maybes based on a lot of other factors, but around Grawls in that area in West Annapolis.
Yeah.
In Giddings Avenue, along West Street in Ward 2.
Yeah, maybe along West Street, but it,
are you seeing what, I don't know, that's tuned in. Who's controlling this? Sally, are you doing that? Or is that Jackie?
No, sorry, I don't know. I was trying to zoom in and it went awry.
Okay.
Things went awry.
You can just use your cursor to kind of go right and left over the areas. So just go right with the cursor and kind of make it not that big, but smaller circles right over the area so people can see the public. There you go. Right there. That would be around Grawls. And then go to the other area in Ward 2. All right. There you go. That's it. Anybody have any questions of Ward 2 or our council member at hand for Ward 2? Any commissioners?
For what it's worth, I can't see anything on my map. I don't see a cursor.
Did you find the peanut butter though? Got to make light of something. Come on.
But I think I know where Grawls is.
You go there enough. Okay, so that's some information.
Would you care to estimate what percentage of the adult residents in Ward 2 might take advantage of a medical cannabis dispensary in Ward 2?
Gee, I wouldn't.
Or in West Annapolis, excuse me?
I haven't heard one word from anybody about this legislation. Not one.
And it is Easter week. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but maybe not. Who knows?
Well, it could, but this has been around since way before Easter week.
And it'll still be out there and go to the city council too. So,
yeah.
Okay. Any other commissioners, questions, Ward 2? All right.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And we'll move on to, are there any other council members present that want to make comment, or the mayor?
I did have a question, Mr. Chair, if now is the appropriate time.
You have a question for whom?
Mr. I guess it may be for the staff, for the commission.
Sure, I'd like to hear it. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, as I sit here, I mean, look, I really, really want to make compromise, because I think that's what it just would be easy, to move this along in a way that would work for everyone. And so would the school and would setting a limit for schools and religious institutions be satisfactory for my colleague, Alderwoman Pindell Charles? Because if that is the case, I would even be willing to stretch the limits and, as the lead co-sponsor, get you know, my colleagues to sign on to an amendment for something like 800, you know, because I just want to make, I want to make room to commit with you on this issue. Obviously understanding the concerns that Ward 3 has. So, I mean, I think I'm willing to, you know, compromise there. You know, the county is 750, so we'd even be ahead of the county. I mean, so I guess that's maybe something that you could take into consideration.
Alderman Gay, I could respond to that. We have, I think, we have Monarch and Walt S. Mills Parole. I think we have about we got two more. We got one daycare that opened up last week. We got another one opening up on West Street. We got one on Drew Street. And I think we might have one more. We got 4 daycares. We have 2 schools and we have 9 churches. And they're littered all over Ward 3. They go all the way over to almost to Safeway, all the way over to Old Solomons Island Road. They span the entire ward.
Yeah, and so I think that would be helpful then in the request, because we then would not be creating a radius that would then suppress the individual businesses, but we'd be creating boundaries to help with because look, if you're at the Monarch and you got to be, okay, let's even say 1,000, because I'm just trying to compromise it. If you're at Monarch and you can't put a dispensary within 1,000 feet of that pretty much covers west or the upper half of West Street, because then right across from that, you've got Mount St. Olives on the corner there. And then so you'd be putting 1,000 feet there. I mean, so we'd be creating individual boundaries across the wards to give more protection. I mean, it'd go into place in areas like Ward 6 too. I'm thinking at the intersection of Tyler and Bay Ridge, we have like those 4 or 5 churches there. And so literally at that intersection, so it'd be creating spokes of boundaries within 1,000 feet in those directions. That would cover neighborhoods, schools. Georgetown East Elementary School is right there. I think that would, I think it is a way to help alleviate some of the concerns of congestion that even some of the commissioners have expressed.
I have a mosque that is right almost all across the street from the dispensary. I don't think 1,000 feet is even going to do it because they're littered throughout the entire ward. I even have one over in the industrial park, over off of Gibraltar, more off of Gibraltar. I've got one over there. And so at Bishop Carroll is in a spot over off of Chickwapin Round Road. Like I said, I've got 9. They're littered literally throughout the entire ward. But Alderman Gay, this is my suggestion, and you know we've talked about this. Greater Parole Community Association wants to meet with you, and they're still trying to get a date from you to meet with them. And so, I mean, you're hearing it from me, but you really need to hear it from them as well. And I understand and I appreciate your negotiation, but I can't go any further than, because literally, I've got 4 daycares, 2 schools, and 9 churches littered throughout the entire ward. You can't go 500 feet without stepping into one of them.
But that's the point, though. I think then that would meet the concerns that you had, because if they're littered all across the ward, and in particular, if they're in close boundary with one another, you'd be successfully isolating Ward 3 from creating or from allowing any more dispensaries.
I'd have to see that map. You might have a good suggestion there. I'd like to see a map of that.
Sally has that map, and she can maybe modify all those circles. Actually, maybe do it before the end of this meeting, down to put 1,000 foot around all those same ones. Or if that's not an automatic function, Sally, if you could just look at Ward 3 and start doing that until you get that buffer.
Sally, we just had one open up back there by Shakespeare Theater. We've got one coming next to Severn Bank on West Street. We got one on Drew Street. We got the 2 schools and we got the 9 churches.
I think it's still not going to work if you include all schools. I think it would work better if you do it like the county and say property owned by Anne Arundel County schools.
No, they're not going to, that's not going to fly. not daycares. We got one right on Drew Street. We got two coming on West Street. Can't think of
The
it.
county
Sally, can you
legislation
put a
actually is
1,000-foot
public and
bubble on?
private schools.
Sally, can you put a 1,000-foot bubble, just 1,000-foot bubble on the map so we can just see the size? And then you could probably get a guesstimate of what Mr. Gay is talking about and what Mr. Kendall Charles is talking about. So when you go back to your other circle map, if you, or this one, put a 1,000-foot circle on there over the next 20 minutes if you can, and come back to us.
I don't have, I appreciate your faith in my GIS skills, Ben. However, they are misplaced, but I can draw a line on
Where's
this.
the draftsman when you need him, right? I guess you didn't have funding for that guy or gal or whoever.
I can show you 1,000-foot line, but that's the
That'll
extent
work.
of my
If you
abilities.
could do that, the 1,000-foot line, and you can imagine a circle just to get a sizing, because Mr. Gay does have a point there. And while you're doing that, we'll go ahead and move on to, are there any other council members present? I don't believe there are, but I can't see the whole screen. Julian?
Mr. Chair, I would also just add that this Monday, we'll have a joint hearing of the Rules and City Government and Public Safety Committee, completely surrounding 0421. And so I do suspect that amendments will be introduced and maybe even passed amongst those two committees. And so I'm not sure how that would factor then into your decision making.
Well, everybody's got to work, and we'll keep bouncing it back and forth. So yeah, okay, thank you for that. That's it.
Okay.
Good news. That's good information for all of us to consider, because it does impact. Julian, there's no other council members or the mayor present, right?
I have one more
Hold
thing
on,
to
Ms.
mention.
hold on, Ms. Charles.
I have spoken to the mayor. He indicated that he would be supportive of my amendment.
Okay. Mr. Julian, are there any other council members I'm not seeing, or the mayor online? I don't think so, right?
Mr. Chair, that's everyone.
Okay. And now going back to Sally, 1,000 meters is what you have, not 1,000 feet. You're evidently are English.
Mr. Chairman, could I interject here?
Go right ahead.
Listen, we don't need to decide whether it's 1,000 or 1,200 meters or feet. If we have anything to add to this discussion, it should be by way of the goals that we think that the two city council committees should be looking at next Monday when they get together to start hashing out the legislation.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Okay, well then we don't need to look at those specific things. We need to say, what is it that we think is important about this kind of a thing?
Well, we're not in the deliberations yet, and we'll get there. I just got to get through all the public comments, so we're actually legally considered.
They're all available on the website. They're all public. Anybody, can read them. We've read them. I've read them.
That's correct.
There are 40 of them. I mean,
thank you. And I want to make sure we get them in evidence so we proceed on. The more you talk, the more you're going to delay it. Trust me.
All right, shut up.
Thank you. All right. Sally, you can correct that line and we'll still show it a little later anyway. I'd like to see it. Moving on to the public comment. Tammy, without further delay, Tammy Hook, are you there still?
Yes.
You don't sound too enthused. We want to make sure we got everything into the record. Tammy, I do believe that you have in the record what Mr. Kendall Charles sent you, and I'm going to share a screen. Of course, I can't while Sally's doing it. Sally, can you unshare your screen? And we'll come back to whenever you get that 1,000 feet perfect.
Yes, so here is 1,000 feet.
There you go. Everybody take a quick look. We'll look at it for 10 seconds, then we'll take it off just so we can keep moving. 1,000 feet is pretty significant. Oh, wait, Sally, put that back up. You can give it 10 seconds. Perfect. All right, there you go. 1,000 feet. Council members, please look at that. That's a significant circle. And with what we have out there, that would be very limiting. So,
I can't see a circle.
No, it's a line. Just imagine that would be a diameter of a circle. That would be a diameter. So that blue line is 1,000 feet roughly. And imagine that as a diameter. And it would be, if you have a whole bunch of those around everything, what Mr. Gay is saying would then be applicable. It'd be very limiting in that area. Do you see that?
I see it, but what I'm saying is you're gonna bump up on some churches. We got one on
I
the
get it.
corner.
I get it,
Yeah.
but I just wanted to show you so we have a reference so we can move on. So
Okay.
that's quite sizable. And that's something for you to take into consideration later on when, and maybe you talk to Mr. Gay on the side and figure that out. Thank you, Sally. If you could stop sharing, I'll go ahead to Ms. Tammy Hooks. Back to an agenda which shows where we have, let's see, where we have the exhibits. And Tammy, thank you very much. I want to make sure we have everything. Can everybody see the exhibits there? Tammy, is there any additional exhibits that are not depicted here that would be entered into the record from what we've had from this meeting and the last meeting?
Just the circle map, that Sally. No, I got that in there. I'm sorry. I think that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, and Ms. Pendel Charles, you see all these comments? Those come from, can you see that?
Yes, I was the one who's made
Right.
sure that Dr. Nash and Ms. Rouse had received them as well.
Okay, and I want to show you that they've already been entered into the record. Well, actually, Tammy, we would have to state that they're entered into the record of this meeting, but we already have them in draft form here to show you that we're going to do that. And
Right.
for all the commissioners. And Tammy, that's correct. We're going to have to ask those be entered into the record, which I'd like to go ahead and do now, since we're going over that. So Tammy, please enter into the record the exhibits as listed in the draft exhibits file.
Will do.
Okay, now it's official. And going down there to the Board of Appeals exhibit type, you can read down there some of the items. And also got Pendle Charles memorandum in there. This is Ward 3, another memorandum, the 1 mile buffer, dispensaries research. There's a lot, and all that was sent by Mr. Gay, entered into the record as well. Public testimony from the last meeting, as well as this meeting, because we have Tierney from the last meeting and Arnett from this meeting. And also we need Mr. Gay on there as well. He's been in both meetings, so we'll have to add that. Tammy? Copy that. You're going to add Mr. Gay.
I didn't put him in the table because he spoke separately, since he was the,
He was.
yeah, since he was the sponsor. So I just put him as speaking.
Okay, Mr. Arnett is also a sponsor, so
So,
we'll have to add him in that category.
right, I'll take him out of the table.
Okay, and you can replace Arnett's spot with our Ward 2 representation. Go
Right.
ahead. Yes.
Yeah, I made that change. Yep.
Thank you.
You're
That takes
welcome.
care of the exhibits into the record and should satisfy everyone. That's our rough draft, so boom, right there. Okay, and in saying so, we have been provided all of these comments from the Planning Commission. That's how they have to go through the Planning Commission's through the Planning and Zoning Department's representation, and then to us, since we have to be somewhat insulated from the public and can't have ex parte communications with the public while something's under review of the Planning Commission. We have been provided those. We have reviewed them largely in their negative against the legislation as it stands. Some stuff is positive, depending on where it's coming from. And we also have that posted on the eTracker website. Sally or Jackie, could you confirm that for the public so they all know where this information is located?
You're correct.
Could you give a little quick description for the public, how they can get to that? Anyone?
Just go to planning and zoning, go to track your project online, but instead of permits, you're going to go to projects, and you're going to look for ZTA zoning text amendment 2021-003.
All right, and that is recorded on YouTube. So when you review this meeting at the marker for 9:10 p.m., anybody can get that number again. Also, it should be somewhat obvious if you're savvy with navigating the Planning and Zoning Department's website. If you're not, please review the meeting and follow those directions. Also, you can ask the Planning and Zoning Department members of the public, and you can ask them and they can actually help you with that. Okay, trying to move on here. I will stop that item and look back at where we are with this. All right, I got to cage my brain here for a second. Commissioners, help me out. We've heard the staff, we've heard the sponsors of the legislation again tonight. We've heard The council members that's are either for or against or neither and observing. And we've had a chance to review the public comment that has been provided to us in advance of this meeting. Now we can move. Are there any other, from the staff, I'm going to ask you now, is there any other evidence that you've not seen presented to us on the screen or sent to us through e-track that we need to consider right now?
Not that I know of.
That's a good answer, because that's what I believe to be the answer. Jackie?
You've identified everything that I sent to you, and I think everything Sally sent to you, and all of the comments that we forwarded to you that we received from Alderman Pindell Charles. And I think you can close the public hearing now because it's continued from the last meeting, correct?
That we're going to get there, but as of noon today, everything that was submitted to planning and zoning.
Nothing, right, nothing came in today at all, you know.
Okay. Thank you.
Nothing even came in afternoon.
Perfect.
So
that's what we wanted to get out there. So, all right, we've had a lot of comment on it. And again, for the public, we've got that information. We've entered it into the record. It will remain in the record and also be available up the chain to City Council if they choose to go research that or want to have it at hand. Now that we've heard the public comment, we will go into deliberation of the commission. So I will now close unless there's any objection from commissioners, I will close the public comment section. We'll move on to commissioner deliberations. All right, public comments on this article are closed. We're moving into commissioner deliberations. Commissioners, go ahead.
Okay, I'll go first. I guess my main concerns are ones that were brought up over and over again. It has nothing to do with, well, it's about clustering is one aspect that I'm concerned about, of course. I don't believe, the school thing is de facto prohibition, as we said. If depending, it is if it's a 1 mile, but not if it's a smaller amount, of course. Parking is a big issue for me on this one. And therefore, I think we have to really make sure whatever we do, it's consistent with the rounds, with the neighborhood and the existing area in a number of ways. That's where I kind of tend to look at special exceptions. And other things like loitering is the same sort of thing, which would be under a special exception as well. We do have those kind of rules put in place for adult bookstores and other things, but it's not really a moral issue to me as much as it is a quiet enjoyment type thing of making sure that it's not a mess it's not a bad or disruptive influence in the community. That's really what I have to say. So I'd love to see what the circles would be if they were just 750, 800 feet and see where it stands, because I don't think it'd be prohibitive. And I also want to say we could consider keep them 2 miles apart as well and see would that be prohibitive. So that's all. Those are my opinions. I don't hear anything at all from anybody.
Sorry, thank you. Hey, thank you, Mr. Iams. Other commissioners, Ms. Butler? Anyone?
Yeah, I'm actually very persuaded by Alderman Pindell Charles's arguments about preserving and enhancing community character.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to really try to make sure that that he's able to do that. And if we're unable to do that by barring this use in her ward, I want to do something that gets as close to that as possible. So if that includes a 1,000 foot, distance between various schools and religious institutions, and that works, I would be all for that. So I really do think that certain wards can get dumped on, and because of historical discriminatory practices, they bear the brunt of some of the worst zoning we have, or the zoning that impacts them in a way that doesn't impact other areas of our city, and it's just not fair. So I do think the idea of preserving and enhancing the community character of Ward 3 is vitally important, and we should respect that however we can.
I think of improving the community character rather than just preserving what's there. So, they've been
Agreed.
put in bad
Yes.
shape, that I'd
Yes.
like to improve it.
Absolutely, David. Thank you. I agree.
Okay, I'll go next. So I agree with, kind of the direction Bob was going in, is that I think we need to put some, to have some general goals and policies that remove the things that are objectionable. And, if something's objectionable with this use being close to schools, then we should advocate for, some metric. If it's, what these things look like, for example, there could be standards that make it look like a doctor's office or, whatever. I mean, I'm trying to remove the sort of visceral sense of, okay, well, this is what, to not think about like what the stuff is in this place, and find out and remove what's objectionable about having that kind of retail establishment. If it's because it looks gaudy, or that's going to create too much traffic, or too many people are going to loiter. Those are all things that we can talk about and put forth. And I don't know that we're in a spot to nail all of those things down to very precise numbers. I think that's still to be worked out by staff, and no doubt by the process of whatever happens in the city council. But I like the idea of putting forth some goals and associated policies that remove the objections of whatever this legislation is attempting to do. So,
am I next? We doing this by age?
You can go right ahead, and we can come back to people as they want to bounce back to deliberations. Go ahead. Absolutely.
Okay. Here's what I suggest. I suggest that we recommend to the city council that the legislation permitting medical cannabis dispensaries in the city be passed, and we're not expressing any kind of a conclusion as to how any regulation is to be performed. However, we are professing the following 4 goals that we would like to see expressed in the legislation and in any future form of regulation. First of all, and they generally involve the absence of clustering. First, that the council establish a distance from public and from the nearest dispensary.
And I'm writing this down too.
With the goal to spread dispensaries very thinly throughout the city. So the first one is distance from existing dispensaries. The second one is that the council establish a permitted distance from public and charter schools. The third one is that they establish a distance from the nearest residential lot line. The fourth goal is that has to do with design standards. A, that the parking standards be consistent with the standards regulating convenience stores. So in other words, that we look at these things as if they were a convenience store and not necessarily as a pharmacy, which probably requires less parking than a convenience store requires. Whichever one requires more parking, I think that Mr. Iam's concern is correct in this day and age. And 4B is that the design standards, that design standards be established, including but not limited to signs, lights, vehicular access, pedestrian access. Okay, there's 4 things. Okay, the first 3 relate to clustering. The last one relates to some design standards. And Mr. Sale can decide whether we vote on them as a group or whether we vote on them individually.
All right, well, Mr. Wallman, that 4th one is almost 2. There's parking guidelines looked at as a convenience store and standards be included. Could you clarify?
Design standards be established. I mean, and I just give some examples: signs, lighting, access, security. I don't know, whatever, planning and zoning will take care of what design standards are relevant.
I got to tell you, I don't understand the whole convenience store assumption that it's like in a convenience store, for example, and the parking for a convenience store, because parking really depends on where you are. You don't need, like, for example, I haven't seen very many 7-Elevens that have more than 4 parking spaces. I think people spend a lot more time in those parking lots than they would at a convenience store. I don't consider it the same thing at all. Okay. And especially downtown, there's convenience stores that, there's no parking. It's the downtown parking area, so I don't quite understand that.
That's because there's available public parking in the garage.
Yeah, there's available public parking, absolutely. But I don't know what I'd like to see I'd like to see what the standards are for a convenience store. If it's 4 parking spaces, that's not enough. Especially
I'll amend it. The parking standards consistent at a minimum with convenience store standards.
And what's the minimum?
I don't know but at the least it would be what a convenience store is required.
See, I consider a convenience store as a place people come in and go right away. And I've noticed that the Walmart, people are there for quite a long time in those parking spaces. And that's a big difference to me.
But how long are they at the Gold Leaf?
I'd say they spend quite a bit of time there. I've sat there and watched. I mean, some people are quick. Some people go in and looking around for a while.
I mean, it could be more like a restaurant guideline rather than a convenience store.
Haven't you gone? I mean, there's got to be somebody here that's gone into Gold Leaf. I mean, that could talk to it. I've seen it, watched it. I've sat there and looked. Specifically, I wonder how it's been operated.
Well, again, parking standards must be established. I mean, if you've got one of these places that's like really on a bus line or is walkable to a lot of people, or fine. If it's in a strip shopping center, it's in a shopping center with lots of extra parking.
And Mr. May, I see your hand raised, but we can't take it right now while we're.
Yeah, well, I don't know that we need to set that number. All I want them to do is that the standards be established and there be some minimum. That's all I'm trying to get at.
Okay, so I see what you've gotten down, and then we can keep talking about that. I'll go ahead and say my bit then. From all of this, we all look at it differently. Obviously, there's for, there's against. There's good reasons for both sides. I get it. It's very contentious. And this legislation comes to us with a use that's not, I wouldn't say the use has been fully developed and matured in its guidelines and regulation at the state and even the federal level. We're talking about something in its infancy, and Mr. Plani brought it up. We're trying to attack something that has not been mature. But yeah, you can get ahead of these things by actually attacking it now, which Mr. Waldman argued. That makes a lot of sense. The legislation comes out as very broad. And we've all come to a conclusion here that the legislation at a minimum would need to have some restrictions added to it. So we get that. The public, at the very least, would want a lack, or at least some of the public would want, at the very least, a need for review. If any stores come into this city, we got to look to the future as well. Let's be realistic. You look around the country, and we've all experienced where this exists in other places. Some of us have been to Colorado, some of us have been to Washington, D.C., New Orleans, you name it. Many places around the country where this has changed things. Mardi Gras for me has changed. Now Mardi Gras smells like a complete pot fest from one end of my parade route to the other as I ride on a Mardi Gras float, and that's over 6 miles, with little bits in there where it's not. that worries me, but that's not, you know, a planning and zoning thing. That's just people's personal use, and that's what they want. That's what they're going to do. And people, what do they use this for? I know people that use it, a lot of people that use it medically. I know other people that use it recreationally. And the recreational side is what worries the public. The use out in public and dirtying my air as I go around town, that really worries me because I see it in DC and I go into parks, try to use it and it just stinks. But I can't regulate that here. I can't do anything but make, I could be going after the legislation to make it not happen, to make it less easy to get, but people are still going to get it. And they're still going to want to come to Annapolis, and they're still going to want to walk around recreational. And in the future, I would say you're probably, if you're looking at the future and guessing, you're probably going to see it's going to be recreational. It's just one of those things. It's recreational in other parts of the country. But how do you stop it and limit it to make it palatable for both sides? And how do you make it so it's really gets a review and restricted? And coming into our city and not putting a undue restraint on people and making people angry as can be, but yet having to deal with it anyway. Because we see that in Ward 3, we see that in all kinds of wards where things are permitted use and planning and zoning says, well, it's permitted use. You know, yeah, it came to us, but what do you want us to do? You got to change the law. So having something so open-ended as this legislation that comes to us, when I first saw it, is dead on arrival to me. We're gonna have to rewrite legislation. That's why they send stuff to the Planning Commission, because they want to get that whole modification done and get that take on it. So to me, the legislation as it stands cannot go through. It just is too broad-based and too many zones that it's applicable for. Mr. Wallman brings up a lot of great recommendations for policy and how to guide this as it goes to City Council. And let's look at number one. The council establish a distance from the nearest dispensary. Does that put us into legal foray where we're going to go against, state law or county law and then look at a lawsuit from the existing Gold Leaf or somebody else? I don't know, but we don't have the time and we can't legislate that and go into that much depth here at the Planning Commission. So it's something that the City Council should look at. I think they should look at that. Establish a distance from public and charter schools. I don't even want to see this in the city of Annapolis right now. I mean, maybe in the future we could see pot stores in the city of Annapolis, but from my gut feeling is you got one on West Street already that serves the city. Doesn't serve it well enough. Well, there's a lot of people that go in there. Maybe it doesn't. Do people in Eastport deserve quick and easy access? Maybe one in their shopping mall. It sounds like from Arnett's ward and hearing no comments, it could go either way, I guess. But for number two, establishing a distance from public and charter schools, I think the City Council should look at that as well, for sure. Number three, a distance from local residential lot lines, absolutely. We didn't have in there anywhere in there, Bob, where it's recommended distance from churches. So I'd want to throw that in there as well, religious institutions to be considered by the City Council for a range. What do you think, Bob?
With all due respect, sir.
Go right ahead.
I purposely did not include it. And the reason I did not include it is because there are many churches, they're sprinkled all over. And I just think that you're singling out churches in some way as deserving of some special significance. And I think that it'll make this havoc. If you've got a storefront churches that could be here today and not here tomorrow, we haven't got a good definition of what really makes a church. You know, does somebody doing Santeria in their basement make a church? I don't know. You know, does somebody doing peyote in their living room make a church? I don't know. But I don't think that we should single out religious institutions of any duration, whatever they may be, temporary or eternal. I don't think that we should single them out for any special significance. I purposely exclude. I think that there's plenty of exclusions in distance from dispensaries, distance from schools, and distance from residences. There's plenty there.
Okay, I still think it should be included. I would like it included.
You'll have to make a motion.
Consider.
This one, 'cause-
Yeah, just if we included it, that means they consider it. That doesn't mean we say it has to happen or they say it has to happen. It still has to be considered, because honestly, we're just going to make a bunch of recommendations. And what I've seen in the past from recommendations, we go to city council. Sometimes they use it. Sometimes it doesn't look like it gets implemented. Their recommendations.
I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, that we vote on the 4 things that I recommended. And if you want to make a motion to add that, then you could make them. I think it should be separated. Okay.
All right. And 4th, there's parking guidelines looked at a minimum to be convenience store. I don't know. You want to modify that based on what we talked of?
I mean, my purpose, but perhaps it should be, the motion should be consistent with my purpose. My purpose is that parking standards be established. I think David Iams raises some excellent points. There's some places that don't require very much parking. There are other places that require a lot of parking. I'm not in a position really to do that research. I think it'd be really interesting if the planning staff were able to do research into the parking standards and design standards that different counties across the Mid-Atlantic have established. But all I want to see is some perspective on parking and design standards, some regulations set. You follow what I'm saying? And I thought that convenience store parking would be at a minimum, because this medical cannabis dispensary or recreational cannabis dispensary is more like a convenience store than anything else I can think of. Gas station, I don't know. So all I'm going to do is establish parking standards at a minimum consistent with convenience store standards. Okay?
And I would have to ask planning and zoning department staff if that convenience stores is really that restrictive, or does it actually add, or is that actually less? Because the convenience store versus a pharmacy or anything, I don't know. You probably don't even have that handy, I would think.
Convenience stores or specialty convenience retail goods store, 1 space per 200 feet. That's one of our most restrictive parking standards. It's the same for medical offices, which you could also use. That is also 1 space per 200 square feet. So
what about retail pharmacies?
Well,
it's also 1 per 200. All the retail parking for any kind of retail use is 1 per 200, except in certain zoning districts like C2 and MX, where C2 there's no parking requirements for any uses. But
Okay.
200 is the standard for retail.
I'll amend my motion. Parking standards should be established. Follow me?
Parking.
okay.
Parking standards should be established. And as Mr. Iams points out, there are places that are very retail oriented, high traffic, and they don't have any parking, although it's nearby in a municipal garage. But they need to be established. Sometimes it's on a individual application basis, but the standards need to be established, and design standards with respect to site issues and so forth need to be established. So maybe the way to put it is to look at this as I don't know. I don't want to get into the process. I just think design standards should be established. If planning and zoning thinks that these things should be treated as major site designs and have to go before the planning commission, then fine. We'll look at lighting and access and all that stuff. If they think that it should be special exceptions, according to certain factors, then fine. That's the way. What process they perceive as being the fairest and most efficient, I'll leave to them. All I think is that to the council, don't lose sight of the fact that you need to deal with parking and design issues.
So when you're saying you approve it, you'd like us to approve it, you saying without restrictions like it had, well, I know you're going to give these recommendations, but you're not going to spell out that it could be a special exception.
Right.
I should look at special exceptions.
Didn't make it clear. Without expressing a conclusion as to what the proper process of approvals and regulations should be, we nonetheless recommend to the council that they approve this legislation with and modify it according to the following 4 goals.
So can I make a recommendation on language on that point? Rather than saying we recommend approval, because I don't think that's really what we're saying. I think what we're saying is what we believe there need to be these things done. You know, the distances, the standards, yada, 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 that you enumerated. I don't think we're saying that, you know, you should approve the legislation now. And it's not really for us to say that we think you should approve it necessarily. We're just saying that you need to do these things. And whether you want to approve it or not is, you know, that their the legislators get to.
You could say either one. Could we
Take
have
steps to
recommended
ensure.
approval in the past? But you don't have to.
We recommend that in any legislation approved by the city council, that these 4 things be included.
Yes.
Not necessarily this legislation, but in any legislation down the line here. Okay. I will accept that amendment without expressing a conclusion as to the process of regulation. We recommend that in any legislation permitting
It is considered.
Is any legislation considered for medical marijuana dispensaries, these 5 things be?
You want to take a quick bathroom break for 3 minutes and then come back and you can write, that'll give you time to write it down, Bob.
Yes, it's fine with me.
Yeah, I need a quick 3-minute bathroom break, all right? We're gonna recess 3 minutes, if you can do it that quickly.
I can type it up.
All right, 5 minutes. And Alderwoman Charles, I see you have a hand raised, but we're in deliberations and we can't bounce back.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah, you understand. I mean, that's,
I understand.
yeah, it's, because then we'd have to, I think legally, we'd have to hit everybody and give your opposition a chance. And
I mean, that's fine. I just had one point I wanted to make, but okay.
I don't think I can, but yeah, I don't
fine.
want to go there. I hate to say that. I don't
Okay.
want to go there at the moment. While we're making progress towards some kind of conclusion of this evening's, which I doubt we're at a conclusion. We're going to be a lot more minutes. Man, oh man. All right, well, if we get the commissioners back and Mr. Waldman can continue to type and we can continue to talk, there's nothing stopping. So I will, as soon as we get Ms. Butler back.
He's back.
I don't want to be too fast on anybody using the bathroom. Let's make sure you wash your hands. God almighty, this whole public service thing is tough. I don't know how everybody else does it. All right, Ms. Butler, do we have you back with your yachty background, sailing background?
No, that's not a yachty background.
Beachy, Myrtle Beach looking-ish background.
Exactly, but not Myrtle Beach. But yes, I'm back.
It makes your hair look so flat because it closes in on your hair. Flattens
like
your
a
hair.
helmet.
Yeah. Come on, I gotta. All right, I had some levity the evening, which I don't want to do, but anyway. All right, we have Mr. Iams, Mr. Pline, Butler, and Mr. Waldman's back there on his computer. Mr. Waldman, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me back there at the computer. Yeah, of course you can. Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and continue talking while you're typing that up a little bit, if you don't mind. It's sign language. Okay.
I'm 30 seconds away from finishing it.
Don't worry, we're at 9:45. We've got time. Get it good.
Well,
and
I can screen share it if you can figure that out, or I can email it to you.
You can email it to me. I'll get it and I can screen share. That'd be fine, but get it right. You got time. Don't rush to, I mean, this is nothing to be rushed. This is nothing to be rushed. But I mean, I will say this, some other commissioners again, we're making, in the public, we're coming to a conclusion on what we see as being issues with this legislation and things the city council and the legislative committee that works with this and the planning and zoning department have to look at, because they're the ones paid the big bucks to do this. And we're getting the input from the public and inputting that. So we're going to put something towards the city council tonight, which has things that need to be considered against it. Whether we vote on recommending this gets passed or recommending that it gets passed, or whether we're not recommending it gets passed, or whether we recommend its disapproval. We don't know what's going to happen. And then a lot of conditions if it does get set up in that way. There's a lot of things that can happen in the next 30 minutes or so. But either way, we don't have the legislative decision on what happens with this finality. I want the public to know that the city council has the vote that either approves or denies, and they can modify this any way they want when they get to it. They can take our recommendations or considerations, throw them out or consider. So I want the public to know what's going on from here on. So if anybody in the public is for or against or on the middle of the road, you're still gonna have a lot of time to go in and argue your case to the city council and other members. And it may even get bounced back to the planning commission or other committees to redo. So I just want the members of the public who are still online to know there's still a lot of input and time that goes on between now and the multiple readings before something like this gets passed and gets put into enactment. Being with that said, I think I delayed enough and filibustered enough for Mr. Waldman to get his item to fruition. Is it been sent?
No.
Okay, let me bring that up and you guys continue to talk while I bring that up. It'll take me a minute. There it is. Mr. Waldman, can you see what I've displayed and is that what you sent me?
Yes.
Okay. I will read it out for members of the public. Some people may not be able to see without, and this is it. without expressing a preference for what regulatory mechanism, parenthesis, I'm sorry, good God, it's late, i.e. permitted subject to standards, special exception, is instituted to regulate medical cannabis dispensaries. The Planning Commission recommends strongly that in any legislation permitting dispensaries, the following 4 goals be included. Distance from existing dispensaries, number 1. Distance from public and charter schools, that's number 2. Distance from residential lot lines, that's number 3. And parking standards and design standards, for instance, signs, lights, access, that's number 4. In summation, the goal is to prohibit clustering of dispensaries, but to spread them thinly throughout the city in appropriate places. That concludes what Mr. Waldman wrote there. And I see that churches are not included in that consideration, as we spoke about earlier. Anything else, commissioners, you want to talk to this? And obviously this does not recommend approval, but it recommends whatever they do with it, they definitely need to look at these items that are items 1 through 4 as being planning department type items they really need to consider before they approve any legislation.
Hey, Ben, Chairman, I would like to just suggest that these aren't actually goals. These are just variables or factors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see a goal that it's not being something that's deleterious to the neighborhood, especially, it doesn't express things like loitering and other things that may be a negative impact, which may require special exception down the line.
Well, when you do, I would say if you're going to consider, say they need to consider distance from public and charter schools and distance from residential lot lines, that's kind of a sub-assumption in there. And if it's a goal, you cannot achieve any of that and still have the legislation go through. It's not a, and of course, we can't limit them anyway. We can't limit the city council from voting.
No, but the goal is to make it so it doesn't have a negative impact on the community as well.
Yeah, right.
And we don't have anything that says that in here.
So is goals the right word? Is it something else?
Well, so if I can offer a suggestion there that the goal is what's at the bottom, to prohibit clustering and spread them thinly throughout the city in appropriate places through the following strategies: 1, distance; 2, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that works better.
I mean, we're kind of wordsmithing here, but
right.
So.
And does this do what we're supposed to do as a planning commission? I mean, let's double check. I mean,
we just give them advice, or give them our recommendation, our thoughts. That's all.
I agree with that.
I mean, there could be, at the risk of droning on and on about this, we could explain each one of these and give rationale for why we say they should do this and get at some of the issues, the issues involved with each one of these that might help guide them, might help provide some guidance as to what they actually pick in terms of numbers and standards and that kind of stuff.
And I'm on the edge of my chair.
That's a question for us is, do we want to write a position paper on this, that could be a couple of pages? Or do we want to just leave it as a top level thing here that we pass on to staff to go do that work?
Yeah, because how would they know that one of the things that I would recommend earlier, and I liked what Klein brought up, is you limit it with special exception, because special exception enforces it to come through board review and gets the public a chance to come in and stop it if they want or support it if they want. Right now, if they didn't do that, if they just pass a legislation, then it's open to zones with those considerations, whereas special exception brings it gives the public a chance to make input for when some dispensary, let's say, wants to go in Eastport Shopping Center, it would then come up to board review and the public gets a chance for input. But how do we make that specifically spelled out? I mean, it says it, i.e. permitted subject to standard special exception, Do we need to go into any further detail, or is it understood? We understand it by reading that. Bob, what do you think about that? You have special exception written there. So it's clearly you're saying consider it.
There are pros and cons to either. There are basically three ways to go. Permit them in designated zones. Permit them subject to standards in designated zones, or require special exception review in designated zones. And so there are pros and cons to, to sort of permitted subject to standards versus Board of Appeals review. And I don't want to express an opinion on that. I think that there should be a process, and a council needs to decide that process. Now, what's been brought up, which is a very good point by Mr. Sale, which is that probably what all of us feel is that anytime one of these things comes up, that there should be some public process for comment. And I would accept an amendment to that end. So without expressing a preference for what mechanism is instituted to regulate it, we recommend strongly that in any legislation permitting dispensaries, and I would include, I guess I've got, is this my screen? No. I would include right where the cursor is. In any legislation permitting dispensaries, there be the opportunity for public comment on any application. There be the opportunity for comment on any application.
Public
hearing. That the following four, what do you want to call them, factors be in, goals make sense to me, but it's up to you guys. But I would include that phrase.
That makes things a lot better.
Factors is good. Factors is good.
Factors is better. Change goals to factors. I'm okay. Change goals to factors. That's fine. That's cool. Okay. And I agree with whoever said it, is that the goal is at the bottom and it should be at the top. And so whoever writes the findings, I would think we should move the goal up to the top. I mean, I could rewrite it, but this is my motion, and I'll permit,
that change you just talked about. If you could add that, and also the goal to me of just prohibiting clustering of dispensaries, but spread them thinly. I think the goal has a little bit more to that. It has, to me, the goal would have to include the ability for the public to have a say-so. So that could also be written into that goal line and submit. And I know, Bob, you can hear me. So the public, I don't want to see just ultimately permitted, and then the public doesn't get a chance to come back and fight it if they don't like it.
I guess the question is, unless the legislation gives them a mechanism to fight it, then they're just saying they're giving their opinions. But if it's not a special exception, they can't say it doesn't meet the 7 criteria of a special exception. So if you're just giving the public an opportunity to talk about it, that doesn't mean anything. I don't know if they get the power, if there's any power there.
That's a good point.
So I don't see the purpose of that at all.
Well, I mean,
call it a special exception.
Permitted subject to standards is.
What are the standards?
Well, that's what 1 through 4 are.
Saying I don't know if that's enough. I don't know.
Well, but that has to be worked out.
I'm more concerned about loitering. I'm more concerned about other things than just parking.
Another thing, we could add another, a 5th one in there about, other factors that are deleterious to civic life, or some sort of feel-good statement like that it deals with.
It gives them a little bit more flexibility, whoever's reviewing it.
Right, but I think what we're sort of homing in on is. What we don't want is just a by right.
Right.
We want to have permitted subject to standards or special exception, as Mr. Waldman points out. There are pros and cons with either one of those. I mean, do we want to, do we want to tie up the Board of Appeals for 6 months with something like this?
I like the idea of putting something in there that gives them a little more flexibility than just saying distance, and they're checking off the boxes, but then it's still deleterious to the neighborhood. Because a lot of people are good about just checking off the boxes and, and not looking at the things that they haven't thought about.
Well, so David, now we're into the fields of morals, okay?
I'm not talking about morals. I'm talking about issues such as, I'm talking specifically like loitering, for example. Like they have, like there's some language in there about adult bookstores. There can't be any loitering there. There's language like that in the city code. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about morals. I'm talking about just people just hanging out in the parking lot or whatever. I'm just saying a loitering issue.
You want to add,
obviously there's no
to design standards, do you want to add security and loitering?
I guess, yeah, I would see that. Yeah, loitering would be fine. It's just something like that. Maybe you have enough there when you say design standards. Maybe that is enough.
And it's important to say that what we have written right here on the screen, we are not recommending approval. We are recommending that whatever they do with it, they better sure as heck look at this stuff at a minimum. And the public having a chance to help make a decision, it is looked at by being a special exception is up there. We want them to consider. And Bob's typing something else up there where, public comment, maybe we'll see what he said, we'll see what he writes.
I guess access covers a lot of the loitering issue. That's more than, maybe that covers it there when you say about access and stuff, but maybe that's enough just because it's saying, for example, so that does give them some flexibility to say whatever.
Well, we're saying a lot here. We're saying that rather than just permitting these things throughout, okay? We're saying, no. Slow down here a minute. Let's think about what the consequences of this are going to be. And I think that Alderman Gay was, he's really on the right track. I mean, he sees what's going on. And these are the kinds of things, the specifics that makes something work well or not. And we don't have the time and we don't have the research. And they have their meeting on Monday. Yeah, we got to get something in front of them. We don't have time to go look to compare what Baltimore County does with Frederick County. I don't got time for that. But planning and zoning, they got tons of time to do those kinds of things.
And I'll tell you what, when you hear what you hear from some of the members we've had, from the council members at hand, they may already have enough votes to go through with as it is. So we better come up with something. If a few of us here want to see anything considered that's restrictive or helps the people fight it who don't want it, we better come up with something well-written that they'll at least respect and maybe look at. So you gotta take what you can get sometimes. And I hate to say that, but we got to come with something smart.
Well, I sent you another version.
Okay, I'll bring that one up. And just because it's going Monday doesn't mean that they're going to vote on it for final approval Monday. They're going to have.
No, I think they'll make some deals. It sounds to me like they're going to make some deals on something.
Oh yeah, they'll work it and get it down the road or whatever. They're gonna consider more items.
It's great. Legislative.
We're just one item of many. Let me stop this share. And we've got time. We're actually right at 10 o'clock. I thought we'd be at 11 or midnight. So
Aren't we supposed to be over at 9?
What?
Isn't it supposed to be over at 9? That's why we have 2 meetings.
No, that's not the case. And it's unfortunate. Let me make sure I get the right one. Hold on.
Number 2.
Number 2. No, number 2. Oh boy. And don't rush something, make something good. You throw up the chain so it gets considered. So here we go. Number 2 is coming. Let me display that. I can't believe I flew counter narcotics for so many years in the Navy, and now something we flew against is coming up for being a dispensary. That's just the way of the world. Let me get this. Number 2.
It's a matter of time when it's taken off. It's taken off of Schedule 1 on the federal list.
Things change on the world, things change. Hold on, let me get the right file here.
Of course it's going to
what's the title of it? Cannabis number 2?
Just 2, yes.
Number 3. Is that the right one?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm fine with this.
Hold on, whoa, let's read it real quick. How could you read that fast? And I'll read it to the public. The goal of the Planning Commission is to prohibit clustering of medical cannabis dispensaries, but to spread them thinly throughout the city in appropriate places. Without expressing a preference for what regulatory mechanism, i.e. permitted subject to standards or special exception, is instituted to regulate medical cannabis dispensaries. The Planning Commission recommends strongly that in any legislation permitting dispensaries, the process shall include the opportunity for the public to comment on any application and that the following four factors be included: distance from existing dispensaries, distance from public and charter schools, distance from residential lot lines, parking standards and design standards, e.g. signs, lights, access, security, loitering, etc. Done. What I see, I was worried about in the first sentence, the goal not being that the public get comment, but then it says it specifically in the second paragraph. So you cover that issue for me. Again, I'd love to see religious institutions instituted in there as a consideration. Since everything else is consideration, why not?
I would vote for that, Ben, if you make a motion.
It's all considerations anyway.
I will not change my motion.
Okay.
So
And hold on, and then these other items are following four factors be included, but we're not telling planning and zoning through legislation to make standards. But does that tell the city council to have the standards be made? Or do we want standards to be made and just have it be consideration with the public as time comes by? I mean, either way, it's out there.
So to me, a lot of these,
but they'll base it on the work that staff does. But ultimately, the council will vote if they decide to go this route.
so to me, what I see is a really small thing that you might want to consider. I see all these factors are really great things, but they really don't have anything to do with the thinly spreading it out throughout the city too much. So I would just write the primary goal of the Planning Commission or the main goal. It's just something like that. Because these factors don't really have a lot to do with this spreading them thinly throughout the city.
Fine, I'll accept that.
So it would be the wording would change to the primary goal of the Planning Commission.
I mean, that's our
Okay.
main goal, or the main goal.
Okay. I'll
Well,
get that.
1 through 3 really are with respect to that goal. It's four that's slightly.
Well, yeah, but it's thinly throughout the city. And I think
But
that's
yeah,
really low.
peace. I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. Call the question.
I second this motion.
Call the question.
There's been a motion. Is there a call to question? I haven't heard that in a long time. So there is a motion on the floor to recommend with this verbiage, be forwarded to the city council with regard to the legislation at hand. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Is any further discussion?
Yeah, I would like to say that I think that including religious institutions makes it stronger.
I would
So
also,
I would
I
be
also
voting
sup-
for one
I also support that and would like to see that amended in there as a consideration. I mean, it's consideration anyway for everything else. And if it's that sensitive, it may not be that sensitive for me or
in
you,
terms
but
of
a lot of other
process,
people
you
are
have to have,
sensitive to it.
you have to have another motion to amend that.
Right. Yep.
Yep.
So I think I've heard a motion by Diane for an amendment. So I think we have to solve that.
Yep, that's right.
Go on.
Okay. That's
Well, I
good.
think you have a motion on the table. It's been moved and seconded. You need to
We're
vote
just
on that
discussing
either
now.
up or down, and
So-
you can vote it down if you want to amend it.
Or we're still in discussion on that too. The concern I have with that is that I agree with Bob. There's a lot of things that can be considered a religious institution and a lot of things that really aren't religious. And even some of these senior homes that we have are being considered religious institutions. So it's not just churches that are considered religious institutions a lot of times.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing I get concerned about. You know, we were talking about Crystal Spring. That was a religious institution.
Yeah, I think, I think public and charter schools is pretty objective. Religious institution,
Could be a St. Anne.
as Bob mentioned, could be almost anything.
Yeah.
But you just ask them to consider it. They could throw it out and not do anything with it. You know, why not ask them to consider it? Because obviously it's a hot topic with quite a lot of people, you know, so why not consider it? Doesn't hurt.
Mr. Sale, for precisely that reason, I'm not suggesting it because it is such a hot topic, and if simply take it off the table, and it's so diffuse, it's so undefined. As Mr. Iams pointed out, all kinds of things are now considered religious institutions. And I think that it really brings in sort of the wrong element into what really should be a secular decision here. I mean, I don't, some of the greatest churches in Harlem, people had to pass by a liquor store to walk in the front door. So, like, what is it?
You think it would hinder it? You think it would hinder it then? Okay.
Do I think that a medical cannabis dispensary within 500 feet of a church is going to hinder the operations of the church? No, I don't think so.
And it really becomes a moral thing.
Right. And then I don't understand this disenfranchisement of the pastors. What do you mean? That they did not succeed in banning something that they consider unholy? So I just think I'd leave it out.
Agreed.
I'm not accepting an amendment to my motion.
We're not putting in their playgrounds either, but that doesn't stop them from considering that. If we don't recommend it, it doesn't stop them from considering it later, for sure. People got to come out. People got to come out. I mean, at least we can agree on this.
Thank you. Thank you.
So where are we? So we're either going to approve this.
Yeah, let's get. How about the
be done,
parliamentary
or we're
procedure?
going to turn it down and then amend it and then approve it as amended. Is that
We
right?
can call for the vote.
Well, okay, correct me. I mean, hey, this is a tough parliamentary procedure here. So we've got the existing motion. We've just talked about it, and we say we'd like to amend it, and that's great. So I correct me if I'm wrong, but correct parliamentary procedure.
It's
No,
been
you have to
moved
vote
and
first.
seconded. It's been
Right.
moved and seconded. You need to vote on it.
And then we either up or down and then amend it after the fact.
If it doesn't pass, you can amend it.
Okay, so and Bob's already taken the word primary to put in there for the first line, the primary goal of the plan.
That would be fine. Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, so what we'd be voting, so we have a motion, a second, any further discussion? Okay, so the motion's been seconded, discussion's over, and Bob has accepted the change to the first line of the primary goal of the planning commission is to prohibit clustering of medical cannabis dispensaries. It is to prohibit clustering of medical cannabis dispensaries, but to spread them and to just, you know what I mean, Bob? Read that statement again.
I would suggest
And
it's a little more clear.
yeah, that would be proper. So the primary goal of the planning commission is to prohibit clustering of medical cannabis dispensaries and to spread them thinly throughout the city in appropriate places. Without expressing a preference for regulatory mechanism, i.e. permitted subject standards, special exceptions instituted to regulate medical cannabis dispensaries, the planning commission recommends strongly that in any legislation permitting dispensaries, the process shall include the opportunity for the public to comment on any application, and that their following four factors be included: distance from existing dispensaries, distance from public and charter schools, distance from residential lot lines, and parking standards and design standards, signs, lights, access, security, loitering, etc., be considered. All those in favor of this as just spoken and slightly amended, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions? The motion passes that we were going to forward up to City Council this document that does not recommend approval or denial of the cannabis dispensaries, but recommends those conditions be considered or factors be considered, along with public input being made towards any cannabis dispensary. That now ends that item on the agenda. Let me stop share and go to that item on the agenda. Okay, 04 TAC 21 public hearing was closed, and now that item is over with item 1. We now have, it's now 10:12 at night, and we have TAC 1, TAC 21, R4 bulk regulations. Sally,
Yes,
how long do you think that's going to take?
not very long.
Okay, it's 10:13. I won't dissolve this anymore. Go ahead. Please start.
Mr. Chair,
Go
if I
ahead.
could.
Oh, wait, who's talking?
Alderman Gay. I just wanted to thank you guys before I headed off. Thanks.
Thank you very much for everybody who participated. We'll thank you later. And don't worry about anybody pleasantries. We need to get on, but thanks all to everyone who participated. All right, OTAC 1, TAC 21, R4 bulk regulations. Please continue, Sally Nash.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. This is ordinance 0121 R4 bulk regulations for R4 and R4R residential zoning districts, also known as ZTA 2021-004. So the purpose of this ordinance is to correct some conflicts in the bulk regulations table and the table notes related to attached single family and multifamily dwelling units. So if you'll bear with me for a few minutes, you know that in our bulk regulations tables, sometimes we put the code requirement in the cell of the table. But sometimes we will add a footnote if we want to elaborate on the requirement. So currently in section 2150-100 of our bulk regulations, we don't list the minimum lot size in the table for multifamily or single family attached, which are townhomes. But we put a footnote. So it's footnote 2. And this footnote says two things. It says first that the minimum total lot area is 4,800 square feet. So that's the size of the lot area. 2 is that if 75% or more of the required off-street parking spaces are provided underground or within a structure, minimum lot area shall be 1,000 square feet per dwelling unit. So this second part of this footnote essentially incentivizes structured parking by giving people additional density if they provide it. So these two ideas are together in one footnote and probably shouldn't have been put together in one footnote. And that is because there are some situations where you have townhomes who they could not take advantage of this density bonus because of the restriction on the minimum lot size. The minimum restriction on the minimum lot size makes a lot of sense for apartments, so that kind of multifamily where it's all on one lot, but it doesn't really make sense for multifamilies that have their own lots like townhomes. So Alderwoman Finlayson brought us this conundrum, and we determined that we can rectify it by separating out the two thoughts in the footnote, keeping the minimum lot area for those two districts in the table cells for multifamily, keeping the footnote, but not having them both together. So separating them to therefore make it so that if a townhouse development wants to provide structured parking and can do so, then they can have a little bit extra density for each dwelling unit. And that they would be allowed to do that in the R4 and R4R zoning districts. So I've also included some maps of where R4 and R4R zoning districts are. These are our densest zoning districts, residential zoning districts, I should say. There's some Forest Drive near Old Solomon's Island Road. There's some at Bay Ridge Road, which includes Watergate. And there's some off Edgewood Road near Giant, behind Giant. There is some on Clay Street and around Clay Street, as well as on West Street near, although I think that is the cemetery on West Street near Westgate Circle, that is zoned R4. Some on Spa Road and
Underground parking.
what'd you say?
Underground parking.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. There's some on Spa and Forest, and there is some a little bit of R4 on Rao Boulevard as you're coming into the city on your left.
Yeah, that's Mariners Cove.
Right. So this proposed ordinance wouldn't affect minimum lot size for apartments or single families. All it would affect is some of these townhome developments and help them take advantage of additional density if they do provide structured parking. Any questions?
I just want to ask Tom Smith what he thinks from a design perspective, what he thinks of this, whether encouraging this is a goal to be pursued. Is that a fair question?
Sure, if Tom is still on.
Well, I don't know.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, there he is.
I would concur, Commissioner Waldman. I do. I think encouraging the density in this correction is a good direction to go. Was that your question?
As a follow-up, do you think it would end up producing things like the first floor of a townhome being a garage? Or
I think it would. Yes.
Or would it really more work as a traditional row house with, the back having a structured parking garage? Would it accommodate either one of those?
Well,
because I think from a design standpoint,
it could accommodate either one of those. Yes, sir.
From a design standpoint, a townhouse where the first floor is a big ugly faceless garage door is really terrible for from a people standpoint. So that's something I don't know if that's where Bob was going, but
that could happen anyway. Garages are an attractive amenity, but Tom does his darndest to make sure that that's not what we get stuck with.
Most of our recent townhome projects have included garages, be they either front loaded or rear loaded. So, we have design standards in the code through site design where we control the architecture, especially when they're planned developments. So, the commission would have a say so in the design of those homes if they even had garages within them or parking structures.
What do you think the effect of this could be on Watergate?
I'd like to think the effect, Alderman, Commissioner, if you're going to talk about townhomes that this changes is, the thing about townhomes is we rarely get to a maximum density in a townhome design in the first place, just because it takes up so much horizontal footprint. Whereas Watergate is really mostly multifamily housing at this point, and likely to be so in the future if redeveloped.
So the only thing that this amendment changes relates to townhomes, not to multifamily dwellings.
If I understand Dr. Nash correctly, yes.
Okay. Does it make townhomes almost by force into 4 stories, because you have sort of, as Mr. Klein pointed out, a garage taking up most of the first floor, and then you've got to go up 3 more? Do you follow me? Does it sort of force 4 stories?
I don't know that it forces 4 stories, because that adds height to each individual unit, but that doesn't increase the density.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. How much density?
Watergate is 1 lot, so it wouldn't apply because it is, 1 single lot.
I see. Okay. So how much density, how much more density? I know what you said, Mr. Tom, which is that townhome developments rarely are able to even take advantage of whatever density they're allowed permitted in any case, right?
Yeah, so typically we're seeing townhomes, we get in an R3 zoning district, which allows right around 12 units to the acre.
Uh-huh.
Most of what we've seen in townhome units are around 8 to 9 ish units per acre, just because by the time you put forest preservation, stormwater management, all the other amenities that go with a development project, it just horizontally gets so large. Unless you go to a different unit type, such as multifamily, and go vertical, it just doesn't fit.
Mm-hmm. So this is theoretically more density, but in practicality, people could not take advantage of it ordinarily.
Well, I mean, there could be opportunities, Commissioner Waldman, but there are limitations when you're talking about single family attached.
Mm-hmm. And how much, what's the density bonus if somebody complies with this?
It goes from a requirement of 1,700 square feet to 1,000 square feet per dwelling.
Wow. That's land area. That's not floor area, right? That's land area.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Wow. That's quite a bonus, but okay. All right. But have you found anybody who's been able to take advantage of that?
We've had 2 projects in the city, one being the Parkside Preserve and the other Sailor's Key, are the only 2 projects, and they have a mix of townhomes and single families there that took advantage of a density bonus. But those are the only 2 so far. But again, those are a mix of singles and towns.
Where's Parkside Preserve?
That's adjacent to Quiet Waters.
Oh, down there. Okay. And Sailor's Cay, where's that?
That is on Bay Ridge Avenue in Eastport.
Right. Okay. That tight little thing in there, behind there. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Are those zoned R4, Tom, or those have a different zoning?
Those have a different zoning, but those are the only 2 projects that I can think of, just to answer the commissioner's question about getting a density bonus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's rare. Okay. Okay. It sounds okay. So you would like to have this. You would like to have this. It sounds like almost a flexibility for you.
Yes, because frankly, if we're looking for places to increase the density in the city and give flexibility, verticality and structured parking should be encouraged.
Okay, I got you. If you want workforce housing, this is what you have to do.
That's one idea. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have no further questions. Good. I got it. Okay.
Any other
Well,
questions?
Any other? We did not receive any public comments on this.
well, it has to stay open for 2 weeks, right?
Mm-hmm. To date, I'll add.
Any other questions from the commissioners to the staff? Okay, we'll open up the public hearing. Public hearing for OTAC 1, TAC 21R4 bulk regulations is now open. Sally, and you've already stated that we have no public comments received as of yet. The public, if you'd like to comment on this, please go to the Planning and Zoning webpage or call the Planning and Zoning Department website to make any comments towards OTAC 1, TAC 21. The agenda also is on the Planning and Zoning Department under the Boards and Commissions tab. You can get that and download it from there. We are the Planning Commission. Now that we are going to keep this public hearing open, that takes care of item number 2. And we have moved on to item G, miscellaneous. Is there any miscellaneous items by commissioners to be brought to hand?
I will not be at the next meeting.
You will not be here gracing us with your presence at the next meeting. Are you going on vacation, Bob?
I'm not telling you where I'm going.
Okay, I'm going to tag along in your luggage. All right, any other miscellaneous other than Bob's absence from the next meeting?
I have a quick one. I sent around the draft language that the Board of Appeals had been considering for ex parte communications. I thought it made sense and wanted to get your everyone's views on that. I haven't heard from anyone. Should I send it around again and plan to talk about it another time?
We've all, I know we've all got it. We've just been so busy.
No, I get it.
At
No
least
problem.
I have.
Yep.
I keep punting that down the curb, but we've got all this legislation coming at us. And for other miscellaneous, we have more legislation that is coming out as for our next meeting that we're gonna have to look at. I don't think it'll be as contentious as the cannabis dispensaries, but it's all takes time nonetheless. Sally, any regards to the next agenda items for legislation you want to talk about now?
Well, I'm
You don't have
a
to. If you
little
don't want.
afraid to tell you that April 15th will be starting our presentation on the legislation for short-term rentals.
Yeah, there's that one. I saw that. That's right. I didn't even want to talk about it. Yes.
That's gonna come through us?
Coming back.
Yes, the proposal is to make short-term rental special exception use in C1, C1A, and R2 and C zoning districts.
Because in the past that none of that's come through us, right?
There haven't ever been any changes to Title 21 that concerning short-term rentals, because we consider the use single family. So this is a different, that's why you haven't seen it before, because it was in Title 7, it was regulated through Title 17.
Okay.
Which you don't review.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Thank you, Sally, for that. Any other yeah. And guys, we are really, I'll be honest with you, we really have a ton of info. And I know I'm sound like I'm playing a violin here to council members who are online saying, oh, really, you got a tough problem? Look at ours. I get it. But it's a lot. We're meeting every 2 weeks, and it's every week. We're putting a lot of hours in. If it comes to time where you just can't do it, it's too much, and you can't make a meeting, so be it. And we either have a quorum or we don't. We don't want anybody getting so stressed out they get out of hand. So let people know. And that goes for staff as well, and Tammy and everybody else, because y'all doing a hell of a lot of work. And I get it. I'm getting stressed out. I'll be honest with you. So, all right.
You want one more thing to stress you out?
I couldn't even hear. What was that?
Would you like one more thing to stress you right over the bend, right around over the hill?
Go right ahead. Shoot. Go ahead. Shoot.
You gotta assign findings for somebody to write that letter to city council about the cannabis dispensaries.
Okay. Do we have any volunteers?
I've done my part.
What was that?
I've done my part.
Okay. Anybody else before I take it on?
I haven't done one for a while. If I had a template, I could probably work on it.
Yeah, and then I can help you with that, Dave. So I'll work with you, Dave, and we'll do that.
And Bob's language too, of course.
Rhonda, I see your hand. We'll get to you in a second. I got your hand.
I can send you a template, David.
Great.
Please copy Ben's sale on that as well, if you can.
Will do. But could you send me Bob's language and I can put it in the template and then send it to you?
I'll send you Bob's latest language with what I understand to be the changes, and I'll copy all the other commissioners in case there's any chance for changing that. And I will gladly help you, Dave, write those.
Well, it sounds like Sally's going to do a lot of it already. But
no, come on, it's easy. Slam dunk.
No, I just send the document with the headings, and then you have to kind of fill in the blanks.
Sure. I just haven't done one in a while, so I'd be happy to do it.
Don't worry, Sally will do all the work for you. So.
Wait a minute.
For us, me and you, Dave. Okay, that takes care of that, Sally. Tammy Hook, are we looking good for all of our admin that we need to take care of? Because you do run the show.
Looks good to me.
And thank you for what you do, Tammy, how you organize us and keep a level head on it all day long. But I mean, I guess she paid for it, so maybe that's why it gets done so perfectly, other than the fact that you're a genius. Thank you, Tammy.
Oh, thank you, guys.
Ms. Hook, for your benefit, I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Wait, and Ms. Pendell Charles is one.
I will second.
There's a motion and a second. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any opposition? Okay. The meeting's adjourned. Ms. Pendle,
Good night,
Charles,
everyone. Thank you.
Charles.
Can
go
I
ahead.
say something?
Sure,
Or
ahead.
is it? Okay, just first of all, I want to thank you all for your vote tonight. I mean, it wasn't what I expected, but I guess I don't know what I expected. But two things I just want to bring to your attention, and you voted on it, but I just want to bring it to your attention. Number one, we've had issues in Ward 3, and planning and zoning really doesn't have the staff to enforce a lot of things that's going on. So a lot of things happen that really shouldn't happen, but it's not their fault. They don't have the staff. The other thing too about what you've written, it says that it should be thinly throughout the city. Well, the cannabis we have is not in the city, it's in the county. So.
Okay.
Yes, but you're getting a distance from the nearest dispensary. You have a lot to work with there. You should be able to affect your goals. We've given you all the tools that you could possibly need.
If you see me run into other wards, you'll know why.
Well, just treat them nicely, okay?
Yeah, I've done that for 66 years.
Well, then beat them up.
I don't have the tools.
Yeah, you have my permission.
Come and help me.
And any commissioners who want to help or work with any of the council members on this legislation is now passes. It's no longer ex parte. You can go help your council members all you want, or planning to get involved, help push things along. But commissioners, it's no longer ex parte. You can.
I'm gonna leave the meeting, gentlemen, ladies.
Go ahead. But you can all know that you can go ahead and help your council members, any commissioner.
Thank you.